Hello everyone, this is your friend Uzumkai Universe 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto was the only shinobi without a fate seal, until Anko, Kurotsuchi and Mabui chose him? Part 2. Sarutobi inwardly groaned while the council had their jaws dropped to the ground. Most couldn't believe their ears. It just couldn't be possible. How was it possible? Granted, Team 7 had the Uchiha on his team and he was considered the Rookie of the Year. To face Kakashi along with the Demon Brat and win was just astounding, but that wasn't what shocked them. No, they had more or less expected that, but they didn't expect what Kakashi had told them. Can you please tell us that again, Hatake-san? Kaharu asked. Right in front of the entire council was Kakashi with his casual look of laziness. He rubbed the back of his head before slightly bowing to the council members and proceeded to answer them, again. It is true. Naruto Uzumaki managed to bring Sasuke and Sakura together. With him as the center, they were able to try and overpower me with their teamwork. Also, Naruto had some kind of weapon. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen before, Kakashi answered, still remembering the deadly Fuma shuriken that Naruto had. It could be said that not much could surprise the copy ninja, but something like that with so much elemental diversity had just shaken his core. In all honesty, if Kakashi hadn't used his Sharingan to predict the spinning point of the unusual Fuma shuriken's blades, then he most certainly would have been in the hospital. It could also be said that Kakashi, as well as all other Junin and Anbu, was up to date with all forms of weaponry that Konoha had to offer, but he had never, and he meant never, seen something like that before. Least of all from the dead last of the academy. The clan heads remained silent. Hiyashi just glared harshly at the floor while the others were more contemplating. They were trying to wrap their heads around the very idea of a genin like Naruto actually posing a threat to, no scratch that, actually posing a challenge to Kakashi Hatake, one of Konoha's best Junin shinobi. Danzo didn't let it show, but inwardly he had a small grin across his face. Damn it, Hokage-sama, see what you have done. We have to kill it now. It was a match for Kakashi. It's obvious that he'll wage war on us all. We'll die and it will be your fault for going easy on the brat. Someone shouted at the top of their voice. The civilian council nodded fervently as shouts of killing Naruto came across the room. Soon, Kakashi and Sarutobi winced at the outcries before Sarutobi finally had enough. Silence. He shouted, blasting a key in every direction, getting the clan heads to shift uncomfortably. The civilians finally decided to shut their mouths as some cowered before the power of the Sandaime. Seeing that he was able to continue, Sarutobi lowered the pressure and turned back to Kakashi. Kakashi, can you give us a description of this weapon? Sarutobi asked. Kakashi nodded and began to describe. Yes, Hokage-sama. It was obviously a Fuma shuriken, but the out length of the four blades were spiral-shaped. They were a very shiny black metal that could glimmer in the sunlight like a precious gem. The spiral-shaped blades allowed for the centrifugal force of the shuriken to continue spinning more than an ordinary ever could, thus making it more deadly. Across the blades were seals, each aligned to a specific element of fire, water, lightning and wind. Kakashi's voice then started to shake, which caught the attention of everyone in the room. Then when Naruto threw it, he shouted Kai, and fire, water, lightning and wind poured from the shuriken. They somehow melded together and the shuriken increased in dangerousness. If I didn't snap out of my stupor and substitute with a log, then that would have landed me in intensive care in the hospital. It's a B-ranked weapon just off of design and not from the added seals. Kakashi paused before he summed it all up. The strange thing, however, was that the metal. It looked exactly like the metal that was showcased by Exodus Metals in the promotion just a month ago, Kakashi said before Mabui Haruno slammed the table in front of her and stood to her feet. That's absurd. Exodus Metals is a multi-million yen franchise that promotes weaponry to Konoha. Why would they ever do business with that boy? She insinuated while Kakashi shrugged his shoulders. Danzo narrowed his visible eye at this information. Even he hadn't know about such a thing. I don't know, but I hadn't investigated it. I just thought it was worthy telling you, Hokage-sama, Kakashi answered, and Hiruzen nodded that it was indeed the right choice. Lately a few things had been revolving around Naruto that questioned the boy's actions, but Sarutobi had never found anything. Naruto was always in his house or walking the streets. It made Hiruzen wonder just when the blonde trained, but being in the forest of death, then it could be said that Naruto was obviously doing something, but what then? Even Sarutobi wasn't sure. What do you think? Sarutobi asked the Shinobi Council. Danzo looked at them all, and all he could see was one thing: skepticism. They were all still trying to wrap their minds around that. For such a creative way of intricate sealing to be used. Fuinjutsu wasn't even that popular of a shinobi art. In fact, it was a dead art. One that people never cared for. But it just sealing had that much power. Then what were its applications? Hokage-sama, I'm inclined to agree with the civilians. Why would Exodus Metals, who we have a very long contract with, deal with Naruto? It all seems fishy. Maybe we had just better stay on our toes and ask him. It couldn't hurt just to be sure, Shikaku said, and Sarutobi agreed. However, right now it was late and people were tired. It would have to be tomorrow that Sarutobi called for Naruto. Yes, you are right. Very well then. Meeting adjourned until tomorrow, Sarutobi said, and people packed up to leave. Sarutobi beckoned for Kakashi to stay behind, and the Junin did just that. Kakashi, when you take your first mission with them, then I want you to keep a very close eye on Naruto-kun. He's not the same as he once was. He's much more careful, much more literate, and much more unpredictable. That is all, Sarutobi said, getting a bow from Kakashi before he vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving the aged Hokage alone. Sigh, why does everything have to be so troubling when it revolves around Naruto? Sarutobi wondered to himself before he walked off. With Naruto. Naruto flipped through the channels of his TV before he groaned to himself and turned it off. Nothing good ever come on TV. At least not for him. The blonde threw the remote to the couch before he leaned back in its arms and looked up at the ceiling. He had spent the rest of the day training himself in Fuinjutsu. He felt that he could take to it much more than mostly not. The academy never taught more than the sealing of objects into scrolls. That is what, they thought, comprised of Fuinjutsu, but they were dead wrong. To think that Naruto could seal elements into a weapon. That made it much more deadly, but he also had other things in his mind. On his table was a report that a messenger ninja had delivered to him. It was from one of his contacts concerning Wave. The threat of Gato Sping taking over the peaceful country that Exodus Metals tried to make happen. It was nearly successful until someone told Naruto that Gato had disposed of Exodus Metals' employees, workers, and supporters. If there was one thing that got under Naruto's skin other than people being foolish and ignorant, then it was him having wasted resources without his knowledge. Now is not the time for reading, but it's the time to think. How can I get over there? It wasn't as easy as it was when I was 7, Naruto thought to himself. He then felt his stomach get a little heavier and he noticed Fu, Tuka and Rinko barking lovingly at him. Naruto narrowed his eyes before he raised his hands and tickled their ears much to their delight. Rinko, you need more practice with your fire. Tuka, you need more practice with water. Fu, never forget that you're our stability. You all did a magnificent job helping me. Nice work. And that's why I have a reward for you 3, Naruto said as the kits waited eagerly for their present. Naruto leaned up from his couch and slammed the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu, the blonde shouted as smoke appeared. As it settled, the 3 kits looked in awe of a large play set for pets. They yipped their appreciation before they quickly enjoyed their time with their newest toy contraption. Naruto, pleased with their reactions to his latest project, just gave a small smile and got up to get something to drink. As he walked into his kitchen, Naruto glared at a chakra signature on the top of his house. He sighed deeply before shaking his head. He opened the refrigerator and pulled out a small carton of milk. He poured himself a glass before addressing. Come out before I make you come out. You really wouldn't like that. I don't think Danzo would like that either, Naruto said, and he didn't have to turn around to know that a root Anbu was right behind him. Naruto had a few run-ins with them before, especially after the day that he discarded high foolishness. Sorry for the intrusion, Uzumaki-san, but Danzo-sama has ordered me to give you this scroll. It contains things that will most likely have you on your toes for a little while. That is all. Sorry for bothering you, the Anbu said before it passed the scroll next to Naruto on the counter and vanished out of sight. Naruto glared at the scroll and narrowed his eyes. He reached for it and unfurled it. His blue eyes scrolled the notes from top to bottom, and Naruto just burned the scroll with a match. So, Hitaki things I'm worth investigating along with Hokage-sama. Very well. I will indulge them a little. I happened a little later than I figured that it would. Well, whatever. Time for the next project. Fu, Tuka, Rinko, time to get to work, Naruto called, and the three foxes stopped playing and quickly made their way towards the basement. Naruto opened the door and the four walked through it. Junin room. Kurenai wasn't pleased as she had one leg over the other. Her red eyes glared heatedly at the wall. She was still going over Naruto's words in her head. Had she been a little prejudiced in her thinking? The Genjutsu mistress couldn't deny that what the young genin had told her had made sense, but something of a high shinobi official like her getting told off by a younger rank was almost unbearable. It also didn't help that that little incident had made its way around Konoha, as some people were looking at Kurenai like she had been in the wrong all her life. Now Kurenai was more than willing to admit her mistakes. Life was an experience and nothing was ever clearly crystal, but even so, it unsettled her. Oh Kurenai, what are you doing here? Kurenai shook her head from her thoughts to finally pay attention to see Kakashi, Anko, and Asuma coming up to her. They each took their seats around the lounge. Nothing, Asuma. I'm just thinking, that's all, Kurenai said, getting a glare from Kakashi, a frown from Asuma, and a stern look from Anko. Really, Kurenai, are you still bothered by what the brat told you? It's not that you're wrong, but he just pushed you in the right direction, Asuma said, trying to lighten Kurenai's mood. Anko agreed and Kakashi gave an eye smile. Kurenai just mumbled something incoherent before walking off. Asuma and Kakashi sighed while Anko abruptly sat down on the soft furniture. I didn't think she'd be so bothered. The Gaki's good if he could leave her speechless. I'm telling you that it was just awesome. I have never had that much respect of someone younger than me in my life, Anko said while Asuma snorted. Please, the brat needs to learn to respect his superiors. The village hates him enough. He doesn't need more of the shinobi populace hating him also. He's walking a thin line, Asuma reasoned as he took a puff of his smoke. It could stand to be said that the Sarutobi clan were avid smokers or something of that nature. Yes, but you have to admit that the Gaki's got some skill if he even surprised Kakashi the way the guy spoke. Right, Kakashi? Did the Gaki really you over as much as I think? Anko asked, getting Kakashi to pull down his orange book to give a half-hearted glare to the purple-haired Kunoichi. Anko, you are undoubtedly interested in Naruto today. What brought this on? Kakashi asked. Anko blinked before she turned to see Asuma looking at her with a small grin on his face. Meh. Don't be ridiculous, Kakashi. I just find him interesting is all. That's it. Who would like him anyway? Anko asked, pouted before getting up and walking to a vending machine. She quickly deposited her money into it before the machine malfunctioned and she aggressively kicked it. Damn it all, Anko said before storming off. Asuma and Kakashi glanced to each other as they chuckled to each other before going about their business. So Asuma, have you asked Kurenai yet? Kakashi asked and Asuma knew what he was talking about. The Sarutobi Junin widened his eyes before he looked at his seal and sighed. It's not that easy, Kakashi. Besides, I would like nothing more than to have Kurenai as my partner, but I fear that if I do then I will lose the happiness that I would want with her. Some of these other guys might be willing to risk their lives, but I'm not, Asuma said, getting a nod from Kakashi. So what about you, Kakashi? I know lots of kunoichi who would kill to be your partner. Are you waiting for something? Asuma asked, and he noticed the look on Kakashi's face twist to regret and sadness. He couldn't mask it fast enough though, and the thing that Asuma noticed was that he wasn't trying to mask it either. Sorry Asuma, I have to go, Kakashi responded, getting a nod from Asuma as Kakashi left, leaving Asuma alone. I never get that guy. What's his deal anyway? Asuma wondered to himself. He shook his head fervently before greatly sighing, leaning back into the couch, and looking up at the ceiling as the smoke from his precious cigarette could be seen. Next morning, with Team 7. Again, thank you for doing this for me. My back is killing me and it would be gracious if you could paint the fence for little. OL me, a woman said, getting an eye smile from Kakashi, a smile from Sakura, a snort from Sasuke, and a blank look from Naruto. Well, that's what we're here for, Kakashi said as they were handed their buckets. Of course, Naruto noticed the woman scowl at him specifically before walking back into the house, but the blonde gave up on caring. Just deal with it, Naruto, Kakashi said, smiling, and Naruto glanced up towards the Jonin. Just put up with it. Who does this fool think he's talking to? I've put up with more shit than he ever will, Naruto thought to himself before shaking his head of such thought. It would be foolish to get emotional off a comment. However, Naruto knew that the others were able to see the horror in D-rank missions like these. A few hours later, was his point proven? Man, they can't do this themselves. Sakura asked as she took a paintbrush to wipe down the fence with. Sasuke just grumbled to himself while Kakashi gave an eye smile as he watched his genin work. They had taken the D-rank mission that was supposed to be, as Kakashi quoted, helping them with their teamwork and to get used to each other. However, both Sasuke and Sakura knew the truth. They knew that this lame-ass chores were just assigned by civilians who didn't have anything better to do and just wanted to be lazy. Kakashi, this had better be worth it or I swear I will kill you, Sasuke grumbled to his teacher. While he was doing this, his family's murderer was out in the world, still breathing, still walking. It pissed him off. Ma Sasuke, you will understand the purpose soon enough. Now then, I guess I will go check on Naruto, Kakashi said as he walked over to the opposite side of the fence that Sasuke and Sakura were working on. It wasn't a long walk and Kakashi saw the entire south side of the fence coated in white paint with Naruto finishing up the edges, but the sight that made him sigh was Naruto leaning against a tree with a scroll in his hands. Naruto had his eyes closed as he tried kunai balancing with a twist. Naruto now tried to make the kunai spin on his fingertips with his chakra while keeping it balanced accordingly. Kakashi turned his head and he saw Naruto's kits running around along the outer rim of the fence, allowing the other Naruto to work progressively. He then sighed and closed his book before tapping the blonde on the shoulder. Naruto opened his eyes and they slowly formed into a glare before he looked up to see a smiling Kakashi. I'm very irritated right now, Hatake. What do you want? Naruto asked, and Kakashi would have scolded Naruto on respect, but the dark glare he got from the blonde just told him to cut his actions and just talk. Naruto, I didn't know you knew the Kage Bunshin technique, Kakashi said. Naruto rolled his eyes and grumbled. I don't. That is an elemental Bunshin. It's just an advanced version. I didn't care for the Kage Bunshin technique. Are we done now? I'd like to train as much as I can since I'm forced to tolerate your presence along with my two teammates, Naruto said before he felt Kakashi tap him on the head with his book. Naruto, these missions are to promote teamwork. You can't get the crazy missions already. It doesn't work that way, Kakashi spoke and Naruto rolled his eyes. Hatake, don't be so foolish. You know it, I know it, hell even the civilians themselves know it. That whole teamwork bullshit might fly with you, but it doesn't with me. Back in your time, a girl like Haruno would never have made it to Genin. Also you know that this isn't about Genin getting teamwork. It's just all about Konoha getting as much money as possible, even if it's to demean itself to manual labor of its civilians, Naruto said before he continued. Kakashi eyed Naruto for a little bit and he noticed the Bunshin finish. It saluted Naruto before it dispelled in water that just fell to the ground. Well, I'm done with my side. Can I go now? Spending any more time here will not benefit me, Naruto said, and Kakashi was more than a little put off. He could deal with Naruto's attitude as he figured it was something akin to young people and their developing, but Naruto was getting out of hand. No, you are going to help Sasuke and Sakura. Now get up away from the tree and walk to the fence before I write you for insubordination, Kakashi ordered, and he immediately noticed the temperature drop. Naruto's hair covered his eyes before the blonde stood to his feet. He patted his legs, recalling Rinko, Tuka and Fu to his person. They walked up to him and growled at Kakashi harshly while Naruto glared up at him. I'll make it blunt, Hatake. Whatever I do for myself and those important to me. Believe me when I say that you don't want to anger me. Now, I'll comply with your wishes, but you will know this right now. You ever, and I mean ever, use that tone with me again, then I'll leave Konoha destitute. Remember that, Naruto said, walking off, allowing the temperature to turn to normal. Kakashi glared at the spot where Naruto had been laying. He wondered what Naruto could mean by that. Naruto wasn't a thief. Well, he wouldn't be a good one, and Konoha had one of the highest economical money advantages to date. To try and make Konoha destitute was like claiming that Sunagakur could be turned into an ocean of water. It just wasn't possible. I guess it was just an empty threat, Kakashi thought to himself before nodding and walking off. He saw Naruto kneel next to Sasuke and Sakura and begin to work along the fence, allowing Team 7 to have their mission done within no time. Finally we're done. Hey Sasuke-kun, I know this new cafe that just came out. Wanna? No. Sasuke rejected Sakura's offer as the Uchiha walked off, having enough of his two hassles for the day. Sakura sighed and saddened her eyes while Naruto rolled his eyes and began to walk off before he was grabbed by Kakashi. What now? I did the work, Hatake. What's next? Naruto asked, though he had a good idea of what Kakashi wanted to say to him. Come to the council room in 1 hour. You have some things to answer for, Kakashi said in all seriousness. Naruto just glared at the copy ninja before snorting and continuing to go off on his own route. Kakashi visibly sighed as he wondered how this meeting would go. Sensei, did the baka get in trouble for something? Sakura asked, getting Kakashi to look at her. He then smiled at her and shook his head. No, Sakura, he's not. They just need to ease their troubled minds is all. Nothing for you to worry about. Go home, Kakashi said, and Sakura nodded with a happy smile before walking off to try and catch up to Sasuke. Kakashi just shook his head and looked at the clouds. Something told him that it was going to be that easy. Good or not, he wasn't sure he was going to like this. 1 hour later, council room. The council all assembled and the Anbu maintained their posts towards the front, sides, and overhead for anything to happen. They weren't sure why, but they didn't really care. Either way, it had to do with them and they just had to do their jobs so that they could go home and try to relax like they always did. Some of the council was busy talking with each other for a few minutes before they all heard the doors open. People turned their eyes and instantly growled, sneered, or glared at Naruto and his kits as they came through the door with Kakashi following them. The Jonin quickly stood to the side while Naruto appeared in everyone's line of vision, and the Shinobi Council now knew that Kakashi might not have been exaggerating in his speak. The way that Naruto carried himself made him seem like he had a better understanding than even Shikaku. The genin had those cold, Blue eyes that could be compared to another blonde-haired person that everyone knew had existed, but maybe it was coincidence. However, they all also noticed something else. The way Naruto glared at them all. He didn't care about them at all. From the civilian side right to the top of the shinobi side. Whatever judgment or reasoning they had for anything, he would never actually care about it. Naruto-kun, do you know why you have been summoned? Sarutobi asked, and the blonde glanced from the civilian side to the shinobi side. Of course he knew why he was here, but the council liked to spout its mouth like an ill-treated child, so Naruto would treat it as such. No, I do not, Hokage-sama. Hitaki has no informed me, Naruto said, and that already got some things started. Boy, Kakashi Hitaki is your sensei as well as commanding officer. You will show him the proper respect. Is that understood? Hiyashi asked, but to everyone's amazement Naruto just stayed silent as he kept his eyes on two people. Only Sarutobi and Danzo. Everyone else except maybe Sume, Shibi and Shikaku and Shuza were irrelevant to him. Answer me, Hiyashi said, growling, and Naruto opened his mouth. Would you please explain why I have been called here, Hokage-sama? I have important things to do and being with these people isn't one of them, Naruto said, and some of the people fumed at the Kyuubi campaigner's disrespect. You're a genin. What important business could you possibly have to do? Someone shouted, but Naruto's eyes clearly stated that it wasn't the fool's business. Sarutobi sighed, looking at Naruto, showing no respect to anyone but him. He wasn't sure, but he knew that Naruto only considered him to be worth his attention at the moment. Something felt wrong. Quiet down, Sarutobi commanded, and people stayed silent before settling for glaring at the blonde as Hiruzen continued. Naruto-kun, you have been called here because Kakashi-san has told us about an unusual weapon that you used in the genin exams. Now this isn't normally a problem, but the council just wants to make sure that you aren't misusing it or have it something that we haven't heard about, Hiruzen stated, and if Naruto wanted then he would have rolled his eyes. He knew how this council acted. They didn't care if he used the weapon. They would probably hope that he chopped his head off with it. Never mind that, they wouldn't even want him to have a weapon in the first place. Show and tell us about the weapon that you used to fight Hitaki-san with. Right now, Koharu said in a demeaning tone. Naruto blinked while his Rinko, Tuka and Fu growled from their places on Naruto's clothes. Would you like me to show it, Hokage-sama? Naruto asked, and Sarutobi, once again, found himself ashamed at the icy, professional tone that Naruto's voice sounded like. The council all looked at Naruto like he was crazy. Koharu-sama told you to show and tell us about the weapon. You will do it right this instant. Mabui shouted, and everyone was once again surprised that she had been ignored by Naruto. He only kept his eyes to Sarutobi, only allowing them to glance at Danzo every now and then. Naruto-kun, it would make things go a lot more smoother if you did, Sarutobi said, keeping his professionalism. Naruto bowed obediently. He quickly reached into his pouch and pulled out a scroll. He showed it to everyone before unfurling it. Everyone could see the complex seal arrays across it, but somehow the shinobi knew that it was meant for storage. Naruto did a few hand signs and slammed the scroll. A poof of smoke came and everyone could see a single blade with a handle. Naruto picked it up and showed it. Like Kakashi said, it was definitely black and the blades were curved into a spiral, increasing its effectiveness in killing someone, but everyone could see that most of the blades were retracted. So, Naruto detracted them. He swung the blade and quickly the extra 3 blades came out into a swirl while the handle protected Naruto's hand from them all. On each blade was what Kakashi had said, the kanji for fire, water, lightning, and wind on each of them individually. Kakashi flinched from the reminder of the power behind the weapon. The same weapon that seemed to be only a B-ranked weapon on its own. Its mysterious aura really made him shiver. The Shinobi Council narrowed their eyes, but they couldn't deny the craftsmanship of the weapon nor the beauty of the object. The way it shimmered in the lights in front of everyone. Its black texture making it all the more ominous. The civilians gasped and Danzo just raised an eyebrow. Uzumaki-san, where did you buy that? Danzo asked as he was rather intrigued. If Root had that, then it would be more than amazing for Konoha. They could easily conquer the other nations if they had a few more of these. The Shinobi Council nodded to Danzo's question as they wondered the same thing. I will not lie to you, Danzo-san, I didn't buy this, nor did I find this or steal it. I made it. It's my creation, Naruto said, and if people were shocked about the weapon, then the revelation sent them over the edge. That's bull. How could you, a dead last shinobi, create a weapon like that? Hokage-sama, this is preposterous. You should confiscate that weapon and jail Uzumaki this instant. Someone shouted. Danzo already knew Naruto was telling the truth. The blonde might be most things, but a liar he wasn't, unless the situation called for it. Do you honestly expect us to believe that, boy? Hiyashi asked, and for once, Naruto turned to him and glared evenly at the man before holding the weapon up. I don't really care what you believe. All that matters is that Hokage-sama believes it. Your opinions mean very little to me. Besides, if I did steal it, then a weapons shop would be on edge about it. They would have come to you about it, Hokage-sama. Not like any of those fools could come up with something like this, Naruto said, and a councilwoman smirked to herself and stood to her feet. Actually, Hokage-sama, one of my good friends from a weapons shop did say that something had been missing as of late. I think he meant that weapon. That brat is a thief. Arrest him, she shouted, and the council called for the same. Naruto and Sarutobi glared at each other while the Shinobi Council wondered what their little private discussion was about. So, Sarutobi called for the person the woman had mentioned, and a middle-aged man came through the door. Instantly gazing at Naruto's weapon, he widened his eyes. Ah, my weapon. Is this where as was? What have you done, you brat? Exclamation mark. Give it to me, he shouted as he charged Naruto. Kakashi and the rest of the Shinobi Council narrowed their eyes before a small look of surprise came over them as Naruto swerved his feet, tripping the man over his own before the blonde grabbed his throat and sent him to the floor while placing the Fuma shuriken close to his throat. Don't touch my stuff. Understood, foolish civilian? Naruto asked, and the man sweated while the council widened their eyes. Naruto, that is enough. Let him go, Sarutobi said, and quickly Naruto released the man's throat, getting a cough from him as he straightened up. Who are you? Danzo asked, and the man bowed. I'm Taro Shins, Danzo-sama. An Anbu called me saying that they had found my missing weapon. That's it right there. The little thief must have stole it in the night while I was gone. I want it back, and I want him to pay for stealing it. The man named Taro shouted at Naruto, who still held the blade. The council was ready to call for Naruto's death before the blonde raised his hand. What is it, Naruto-kun? Sarutobi asked as the council glared at him. Hokage-sama, before this fool tries to run my name and integrity through the dirt anymore, may I hand the weapon to him? Naruto asked, and Mabui jumped up. So you admit that you stole it, brat? Mabui shouted, and Naruto turned to her. Silence, you fool. I'm just about to foil a foolish attempt. Here, Taro-san, your weapon. However, I would like to know, can you retract the blades? Naruto asked, and Taro sweated. The council glanced to him as Naruto held out the weapon in front of him to take. Taro snorted and took the weapon. Immediately as he took it, everyone noticed that he struggled to just lift it up, showing that it was quite heavy in its own right. Taro gulped and turned to the councilwoman to his far left. She nodded earnestly, and Taro tried his hardest to retract the blades. The Shinobi Council narrowed their eyes, and so did Sarutobi and Danzo. After a few minutes, Taro grinned and successfully retracted the blades just like Naruto had done. Told you it was mine. The weapon shop owner said, getting a nod from Naruto. The civilians grinned successfully before they heard Naruto speak. I can't deny that you did, Taro-san. Now then, I'd like a question from you. As I'm sure you know that metal is quite rare. It is yours after all. Now please answer me this. That metal has to be burned at what degree? 220, 400, or 350? Naruto asked and Taro gulped again. He stupid brat. Obviously it had to be burned at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or it would melt, Taro said, and Naruto just glared and closed his eyes. You are a disgrace to the weapon-making business. The answer was none of those. The real answer is that it has to be burned at 299.9 degrees exactly, or two things will occur. If too low, then it won't soften. If too much, then it will lose its edge properties. Get out of my sight, worm, Naruto said, taking his weapon back. Taro widened his eyes while Sarutobi glared. Anbu, arrest Taro-san immediately, he ordered, and the Anbu dragged a yelling Taro off somewhere. Naruto pocketed the weapon and the councilwoman growled as her plan failed. Then Naruto-kun, we have acknowledged that it is yours truthfully. Now then, can you please tell us, what is the name of that metal? Sarutobi asked, and Naruto folded his arms. Even if I told you, you wouldn't be able to mine it, Hokage-sama, but you are in charge. The metal is known as Uzuin. It's called this, I believe, because I found it near a whirlpool. That's where the metal is in its raw form. I wouldn't recommend going for it, as only those with my chakra levels could even hope to get it, Naruto said, getting a scowl from the civilians as they hoped to get their hands on it as well. Well, Naruto, since you're the only one who knows where it is and can perfect it, then would you mind making some for your team? And for the village? Kakashi asked with an eye smile. Truthfully, he would love to have one. No doubt he could create something amazing with it. He could train Sasuke and Sakura to use it, and their team might have a better shot if he nominated them for the Chunin exams. However, Kakashi came to the full force of Naruto's piercing glare before the blonde snorted. Don't think I forgot your tone, Hatake. Now then, I don't mind making them for the village, Naruto said, and people brightened up immediately before Naruto continued. So long as they pay me 1 million yen per purchase. Kunai and Shuriken are 20,000 yen. Fuma Shuriken are 40,000. Swords are 150,000. Custom are 50,000. Depending on what they want, the price will increase or decrease. A complete set of more than 6 for each results in 1 million yen. Thank you, Naruto said with a bow, and the civilians dropped their jaws. That's outrageous. That's as much as an S-rank mission. You're crazy if you think that Konoha is gonna, a male merchant yelled before he was silenced by Naruto. Fine, go and try to find the location. Even if you do, then you won't have the permission to go. Also, if you're not a shinobi, then you're dead. Am I excused, Hokage-sama? Naruto asked, and Sarutobi nodded. Naruto, I would like to speak a little later about those prices, Sarutobi said, and Naruto nodded before he spun on his heel and made his way for the door before he felt his shoulder grabbed again. Naruto, we're a team. You made such good weapons. Don't you think it would be wise to share it with your friends and your sensei? I could teach Sasuke and Sakura to use them, and the weapons are really strong. How about it? Kakashi asked. Friends, Hatake-san, don't be ignorant. I do nothing for free. However, I'm not adverse to helping others. Even though anyone could give a damn about me, but that way of thinking is foolish. So unless you, Haruno, and Uchiha can pull your little money together, then I would kindly ask that you leave me to my work, Naruto said before he, much to everyone's surprise, left the room via shunshin. Kakashi sighed and civilians roared against Sarutobi about the things that just happened in front of them. Sarutobi could only sigh as he rubbed his temples. This just wasn't his day. With Naruto arrived at his house and gave a very heavy sigh. He was tired and he really didn't feel like working at the moment. Right now, he could just feel the comfort of his couch. Maybe a good book in his hands and then something to eat for himself, Rinko, Tuka and Fu. Then they would work or scavenge for more metal. Naruto fished for his keys and opened the door. He walked through and the sight made him raise an eyebrow. He saw Anko sleeping soundly on his couch. In her hands was one of his books, Mysterious Light, a drama romance. What are you doing here? How did you even get at my house? Naruto wondered while Rinko, Tuka and Fu wped their noses at Anko. They took in her scent and glanced to each other curiously. Naruto pulled up a chair and took out a book, but not before taking a comforter and pulling it over the Tokubetsu Jonin. As he had done that, Naruto took the time to examine Anko. Her slender legs, and her tight waist that worked with the trench coat she wore which just barely concealed her assets. Her lovely, pale face and the light snoring of her breath that trickled on his cheek. Naruto snorted and had pulled up the covers before he stayed for a little while. 6 hours later, Anko yawned and looked up to see Naruto's ceiling. Oh shit, Anko said getting up and she noticed the comforter on her body. She glanced at it for a little bit. She had been caught sleeping by the man of the house and he just let her rest there. Gaki, Anko mumbled to herself. Oh, you're awake. So, glad that my couch was comfortable for you. Anko turned her head fast and she noticed a slightly beaten up Naruto with a large scroll on his back. His kits were panting heavily before they laid down on the carpet in front of them. Their fur was wet and they shivered. However, that was before Naruto placed a towel over them and began to dry them off, letting their fur fan out like normal. Sorry for using your. Anko was interrupted by a question from Naruto. Why are you here? Naruto asked bluntly as he continued to dry his kits off. Anko blinked and straightened up her body. Well, I missed you, Foxy-kun. It's been a few days since I've been to your house, which is still neat as always. Didn't I say that we needed to do more stuff? Anko asked while Naruto narrowed his eyes. He just sighed and shook his head. Mitarashi-san, it's not really right for you to be here. Don't you have your reputation to think about? You wouldn't want to be associated with the demon brat, Naruto said, and Anko narrowed her eyes. First, Gaki, the name is Anko. Not Mitarashi-san. I hate that stuffy shit. Second, I could give a damn about what people thought of me now. They can't do shit anyway. I wanted to come, because I wanted to come. Nothing more or less, Anko said, and Naruto just shrugged it off. Do what you want, he replied. Seeing that the three were clean, Naruto took another towel and wiped the obvious dirt from his face off of his body. Alright, I will then, Anko said, grinning, getting a small glare from Naruto. The blonde heavily sighed and shook his head before he disappeared into the basement with the large scroll. It had only been a few minutes, but he then returned only to be grabbed into a headlock by Anko. So since I can do whatever I want, then I want you to buy me a drink, Anko said, and Naruto snorted. Why should I? He asked, and his response was a glare from Anko. Because I can pull rank and force you to. Isn't that right, Foxy-kun? Anko asked. Naruto's response was to grab Anko's arm and unheadlock himself. 1. You couldn't force me to do anything. 2nd, I don't give a damn for rank. Using such a thing instead of using reason is foolish, Naruto returned. Anko glared at him before she sighed and begged. Oh come on. It won't be long. Nai-chan is gone, Kakashi wouldn't take me for shit and anyone else is a limb faggot. It's not like I'm telling you to date me. Anko shouted, and Naruto paused. He looked at the ground before he noticed Rinko and Tuka looking at him. They butted their heads against his legs, telling him to go. Stop your shouting. Alright, fine. I'll go. Got nothing to do here anyway. Just let me change, Naruto said, and Anko nodded happily. Naruto disappeared upstairs and in a few moments came down wearing a blue shirt and black shorts. He led Anko out of the door, and to his surprise Anko shot off through the forest with Naruto not far behind her. They raced across the trees and Anko was surprised that Naruto could actually keep up with her. It was another thing that she had found to be amazing about the person behind her. Naruto didn't even look winded. Not bad. Let's see a little more, Anko thought before she grinned and vanished in a flash of speed, leaving Naruto behind. The blonde narrowed his eyes before a small grin appeared on his face. Interesting. Anko hopped through the trees in a blazing speed before she made it to the gates. The Tokubetsu Jonin huffed and leaned against the metal. Sucker, she said before she felt a tap on her shoulder. Too slow, Naruto said next to her, and Anko widened her eyes considerably. Not bad for a brat, Anko said, and Naruto just took it sparingly. They stopped the run and just casually walked towards the village. Somewhere else. Man, I tell you, Kurenai-sensei was brutal during training today. I wonder what happened to her, Kiba said while Shino and Hinata stayed silent. They didn't say anything. However, they couldn't deny that what the Inuzuka said did hold to truth. Kurenai had been sort of hard in the training. Mostly on Kiba for some reason, and she always seemed to be muttering to herself. They were lucky that she got called away on a mission and wouldn't be back for a good little while. So, what do you guys want to do? Kiba asked. I have to go home soon. Ootu-sama said that I should, Hinata said shyly, getting a nod from Kiba and Shino. Ah, really? Well, that sucks, Kiba replied. Isn't that Naruto-san? Shino asked. At the mention of Naruto's name, Kiba and Hinata quickly turned their heads as they did notice Naruto in the streets. They could see some people muttering to themselves, while Kiba and Hinata, much to their confusion, could see a woman walking next to him. She was obviously taller than him, but she was still talking like they had become the best of friends. What the hell? Who's the babe and why is she talking to that loser? I'm better than him, Kiba shouted while Hinata just looked on sadly. However, inwardly, she was growling and clenching her clothes. Shino didn't seem to have an opinion whatsoever. Hey guys, what are you looking at? Shino turned his head as he noticed Shikamaru, Choji and Ino walking up to them. Hinata pointed a shaking finger in front of her as Team 10 looked. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow while Ino gaped. Choji just ate his CS as Ino shook her head. Is that woman blind? She's with the class loser. Ino shouted, getting Kiba to nod. Maybe Naruto is trying to get a partner. Besides Sakura-san, he's the only one to not be from a major clan, Choji said, and everyone seemed to accept that before Kiba snorted. Please, I'm more of an alpha than that asshole is. What would she see in such a loser? Kiba asked, and no one could say anything. Troublesome is what is it? Well, except for that, courtesy of Shikamaru Nara. Ino suddenly grinned and rubbed her hands together. Let's follow them. She opted, and everyone else except Shino, Shikamaru and Choji agreed. With Naruto and Anko, Anko grinned happily as her blonde companion had followed into step with her. Naruto had his hands in his pockets, just letting Anko guide him through the streets of Konoha. She didn't even mind the stares of the people against her and Naruto. She was used to such shit, and Naruto didn't seem to care about it either. He just took it all in stride as always. So, where should we go? Anko asked, and Naruto snorted. I was here to just buy you a drink. Once that drink ends, then I'm out of here, Naruto said, and he noticed Anko's grin lessen. It then quickly shot up and the blonde glared. Fair enough. Hey, come on. Before you buy my drink, how about we play a game? Anko asked, and Naruto rose an eyebrow before he felt himself dragged into a casino. Naruto rolled his eyes as they entered. Why would they go in there? This doesn't seem like a date, Ino said while Kiba snorted. Would you expect the Dobi to know how to do a date? Kiba asked, and Ino shook her head laughing. However, both could feel the slowly, but steadily rising ki from Hinata, who had her Byakugan active. Come on guys, this is troublesome. Let's just leave them alone before we get in trouble, Shikamaru said to them. This could be an interesting development, Shino said, adjusting his glasses. Shikamaru groaned as the two squads tried to enter into the establishment before they were pushed out of the way by a guard. Read the sign, brats, he said, and they looked to see a sign that say, no one younger than 16 is allowed to enter here. Ino growled and so did Kiba. Then what about the Dobi? He's our age and he got it with that purple-haired lady. Kiba protested and the bodyguard raised an eyebrow. He went back a few minutes and indeed he did notice a blonde kid about their age going in, but he also noticed. Oh well, sorry about that. She's one of our members here, so she's allowed certain privileges. Better luck next time, brats, he said before he casted them away. Teams 8 and 10 growled before they decided to wait near a shop for them to come out. Meanwhile, Naruto and Anko entered the casino to see people playing before she grabbed him and took him through the slots. You brought me here to play slots? Naruto asked. To him, gambling was for the weak. Those who couldn't get money on their own or those who were just as irresponsible as they came. However, he had dabbled in it and it could be said that he had a reputation. Hey, isn't he that guy? Oh man, doesn't that woman know who she's with? Oh man, where are they going? We've got to follow. Some people said as Anko noticed a large crowd of people gathering. She came up to a door and Naruto recognized it immediately. He rolled his eyes and sighed. Seems that he would be making a small appearance. Hey you, we want a match in the back. Anko said, grinning, and a man guarding the door they wanted glared to her. Sorry, but the tournament is already going on. You'll have to come back. Tear. Oh, forgive me, Golden Fox-sama. You are always welcome. Please right this way, the man said, and for once, instead of his kits, Naruto gave a small smile. Takashi-san, that's enough. I'm just doing this as a favor to a certain woman, Naruto said, glaring at Anko, who just blinked. Takashi nodded his head earnestly before he brought Naruto and Anko through the door. I'd like to present Golden Fox-sama. He shouted and people immediately stopped playing and glanced towards Naruto. Glaring at him was a gruff man who was smoking a cigar. He smirked at his open table. Right now he was currently enjoying his winning of the tournament that he had just participated in, but he never imagined a legend to make an appearance. This is the Golden Fox. But he's just a damn kid. Hee, this will be easy, the man thought to himself with a nod before Naruto walked through the crowds. Anko still seemed surprised that Naruto could be well known in a well-kept casino. It didn't make sense to her, or rather it had made her put up another page in the things that she didn't know about Naruto, into her head. She would find out his secrets. He intrigued her unlike the other brats she had met. Yo, Golden Fox. Haven't seen you in a long time, a man in a suit said before Anko noticed his glare turn ice cold. Are you still with those damn bastard foster parents of yours? He asked, dealing the cards for Naruto and the tournament winner. Anko raised an eyebrow at what he meant by that, but Naruto responded. Those fools are long gone from my life. Have been since I was 7 and it will stay that way, Naruto said, getting the man to nod his head. Good. Always hated those jackasses, he said before he finished and backed away. People muttered to each other as the tournament winner spoke. Kid, do you know who you're dealing with? I'm Roshiki Daruma. People call me Lucky Roshi. I've better plenty of people. You're in over your head, he said, and Naruto snorted as he picked up the cards. Naruto, do you know what you're doing? Anko questioned silently into his ear. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. Is that right? Well then you won't mind playing me in some poker. In this scroll is enough money for you to probably try and buy out the Senju compound to the far north of here. I will bet that, and you will not only bet your winnings, but also your, do you have a family? Naruto asked, and Roshiki shook his head that he didn't. Good, then you will also bet your house and all its living things. Don't go back on your word. I hate those who do that, Naruto said, and Roshiki nodded, though Naruto noticed it was a hesitant one. You foolishness will be your demise, Naruto thought to himself. Anko gulped as she watched Naruto play. Naruto pulled a card and Roshiki called. Naruto snorted, then took another. After him Roshiki took a card. They both continued to do this and trade cards with the other. The people gulped as not a sound was heard. The Lucky Roshi versus the Golden Fox. Anko couldn't stand it anymore and quickly pulled someone to the side. Hey, why are you all swooning over the Gaki like he's Kami on Earth? Anko asked, and the person looked at her incredulously. What, have you been living in a cave or something? Don't you know who he is? The person asked, and Anko shook her head as the person, now female looking, looked forward and grinned. He's Golden Fox Sama, the red light district's strongest gambler, she said, and Anko widened her eyes. All in, Naruto said, and Roshi gulped. He could win. He had it made. His cards had lined up perfectly. Nothing wouldn't work for him. This kid was bluffing. And all in was suicidal. Check. End. Roshi called, and they both landed their cards on the table. Outside. Man, what the is taking them so damn long? I wish they would get out here already. Kiba shouted, getting the others to nod. However, they all heard a loud shout, and they turned to see Naruto and Anko running out of the casino with the blonde carrying a large bag as well as a land rights paper. They too shot off into the crowd before an unknown man came out angrily. He looked left and right for them both. Where are you, brat? He shouted at the top of his voice. What the hell just happened? Ino asked as Roshiki ran off to go and find Naruto and Anko, leaving the teams to wonder what they had just seen. Man, it already. This is boring and a drag. I'm going home. My dad is already going to kill me as it is, Shikamaru said, walking off while Shino followed. With Naruto and Anko, both huffed and looked around the corner. Sure enough, they weren't being followed, and Anko laughed. Man, that was fun. How did you do it? That was amazing. The odds were all in his favor and you still beat him with a 2-pair. That was amazing, Anko said, and Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. It was nothing special. It's how I've always done things. Gambling might be for the weak, but it takes the principles of shinobi tactics. Cheat, dominate, crush, and leave the foolish opponent at your feet. But I will admit it to you. I did have fun seeing his face, Naruto said, getting a small smile. Anko nodded her head fast before she noticed one of her favorite bars. She brightened up and grabbed Naruto by the arm. Now what about that drink, Foxy-kun? Anko asked, and Naruto shrugged before they walked off. Both went into the bar and sat at a stool. Anko ordered her drink while Naruto didn't. He didn't drink, and more than likely he wouldn't either. Drinking impairs judgment, and that gives rise to mistakes. It was foolish. Anko took a sip of her drink and smiled. I guess I should thank you. I did need to get today, Naruto said unexpectedly. Anko glanced towards him, and she noticed him staring at nothing in particular. Think nothing of it, ga. Naruto. We're friends, right? Anko asked, and Naruto snorted. Friends, huh? I don't know that word enough. It's weird to me. Even Rinko, Tuka, and Fu aren't my friends. I feel like I'm their father mostly. They don't have anyone and I adopted them. I care twice as much about them as I ever will for my so-called teammates, Naruto said, and Anko sighed. That's a shame. I think you're awesome company, Anko admitted. Well, then you're the only one. Why are you even here right now? Why break into my house? Why do any of that shit? Naruto asked. He wasn't sure why, but he just felt talkative at the moment. Why? Well, I didn't have a reason for it. Well, I guess I can't say that. You are a genin, and yet, you never asked anyone to be your partner. Why not? Anko asked, though she could fathom a guess. Don't be a fool, Anko-san. You really think anyone would care to be my partner? I don't need a partner either. I've survived this place for 13 years. I'll be damned if I couldn't take it now, Naruto answered. You know, I thought like you. I thought that I didn't need anyone either. I thought that everyone was out to get me. HMPH, I hated it, but I've got friends. Though I don't have a partner, Anko said, and Naruto turned to her. He saw a longing look in her eyes, but it was replaced instantly. Really? I thought you were the great, and why, Anko-sama? You gonna be picky? Naruto asked, and he lightly flinched as Anko jabbed him in the shoulder. No, brat. I'm not picky. I just refuse to trust anyone to have my back again. Besides, Who truly wants to be the partner to the snake bitch? Anko said, keeping most of it silent and to her own. She quickly downed the drink before she asked for another shot. Outside, 2 hours later. He's in there, Roshiki-sama. Do you want us to go and fight him now? We'll tear him apart and leave his body for the buzzards, someone said while Roshiki held a large weapons. He pounded it into the ground and grinned. You're going to regret making a fool out of me, Golden Fox, he said with an insane grin. Back inside, and HATSS we I wanna AAA get stronger, hick. All Joe W. I am was boss, Anko said drunkenly while Naruto sighed. He shook his head before he paid the bartender to allow them to leave. Yeah, whatever you say, Anko-san. Let's get your drunk ass home, Naruto said to himself as he quickly grabbed Anko and picked her up. Naruto and Anko exited the bar as the blonde huffed to take her home. Oh wait, he had no idea where she lived. Man, you couldn't have passed out after I figured out where you lived. Naruto asked before he dragged Anko through the streets. Naruto-kun, give me a kiss. Anko said and Naruto growled before managing to hide a blush from his face. He shook his head and continued on. Naruto walked through the village asking people for Anko's place, which he was happy that they were too confused to see a genin lugging around a junin to really know just who they were talking to. Finally talking to a busy someone who knew Anko, they gave him directions to her house, which just so happened to be an apartment complex. Naruto dragged Anko up the stairs as Anko started to sing. Yuto, won't you your skin for me? I will arma sn, I can make a sweet cape. Won't you dance or me, oh Naru, too. You rule over ko, Noah. I will charma sn, I can make a sweet cape. Oh Naruto, won't you your skin for me? Anko sang while Naruto brought Anko to her door. Finally. Now then, foolish woman, time to get you in your room so I can leave. Naruto searched Anko's pockets before he widened his eyes. No keys. The blonde groaned and resisted the urge to shout at the top of his voice at whoever was mocking him at the moment. He couldn't very well bust the door down, as that would just get him more attention than he ever wanted at the moment. Naruto sat down and looked at Anko, who had leaned her drunken head on his shoulder. The blonde narrowed his eyes before he noticed Anko had stopped singing. Now she seemed to be mumbling. You were an outcast like me. I wouldn't mind if you were my partner. Anko finished and Naruto sighed. He shook his head before lifting Anko up and hitting the streets again. Naruto lugged her for a little while and left Konoha, entering the forest before he stopped. The fields were almost too clear. He was surrounded, the people had weapons and they were leaking a premature ki. The blonde sighed and shook his head left and right. Sore losers, I bet, Naruto said to himself with a nod. The blonde quickly laid Anko near a tree and hanged her body while he got to his feet. All right, come out, fools, Naruto said, and bandits quickly appeared all around him. Naruto heard chuckling, and out of a dark alley, he noticed Roshiki glaring at him while holding a massive twin spike club. You pissed me off back in there, brat. You're about to pay for that, he said, swirling his weapon around while the people surrounded Naruto. The blonde shadowed his eyes and smirked dangerously. Foolish man. You think you can compete with me? You think you're pissed? I'm stuck lugging around a damn woman who's as drunk as all shit. People like you piss me off. This is good. I needed a little stress relief, Naruto said, massaging his muscles. Get the brat, Roshiki shouted, and the men quickly charged at Naruto while the blonde sighed. That's it, come on. I have a new toy I want to try, Naruto thought to himself as he placed his hands in his pokes and pulled out 2 kunai. He placed them on the ground and cracked his knuckles. He then took out a kunai and quickly charged at everyone. The first few people tried to swipe the blonde with their swords, but Naruto was too fast as he slid across the ground. He threw 3 kunai at them. One of them blocked and the others lodged themselves in two heads of two men. They fell to the ground, dead. The others growled and charged the blonde some more. They swung their swords, but Naruto swerved through them all. He quickly jumped into the air before pulling his hand back. Futon. Shinkushoha wind release. Vacuum palm wave, Naruto shouted as he launched a blast of wind from his palm, slamming men into the ground as they shouted through the forest. Naruto landed safely before he quickly placed his hands in his pouch and pulled out his Fuma Shuriken. He took out each of the blades as they swirled into the shape that he wanted. Naruto touched the top of the lightning kanji before he grinned. Vanish, along with your ignorance, Naruto said as the lightning from the seal sprayed out and the blonde quickly tossed it into the air. All the men gasped as the lightning connected to the two kunai on the ground, making a sort of tether line. What did you do? Roshiki shouted as Naruto picked up the kunai on the ground. Oh, nothing. Just use the Raiden element to polarize to the two kunai, allowing a temporary connection. Now, I can control the direction that my Fuma Shuriken goes. Here, have a taste. Naruto yelled as he spun the kunai around. Everyone watched as the lightning attached to the kunai and Fuma Shuriken followed his command as swung around as it converged on the men. Fuma Shuriken. Yon Sensoha, the blonde called out as the rest of the elements splashed out and caught everyone into a heavy explosion. The dust cleared and Naruto looked up to see the disgusting remains of dead bandits. He snorted and shook his head, pocketing his kunai and Fuma Shuriken. Know your place, Naruto said before he unhinged Anko and walked off to his house. No, he didn't leave her there. He took her. She might be a foolish woman, but she was entertaining at least. Naruto grumbled and opened the door to his house. It was late. Very, very late. The blonde struggled to bring Anko up the stairs before he kicked his door open. He grumbled to himself before he struggled to place Anko on his bed. She was just passed out without a care in the world. Naruto sat on the edge of the bed and glanced back to Anko. How much had he changed just from meeting her? He never cared about any other shit. He never cared who visited his house. He never would have went out with someone. You're an odd one, Naruto said to her, though Anko didn't hear him. Naruto placed her in his bed before he took off his clothes, dressed for bed and went to sleep as well. As he closed the light out, Anko opened a single eye. I'm odd. In what way? I'm eccentric. She smirked to herself and nodded before she went to sleep. Anko had seen the quick work Naruto had made of the bandits and it surprised her. She was still very much drunk, but her shinobi senses were active and she wanted to see the extent to Naruto's abilities. However, she couldn't even get that as the alcohol passed her out. Just like it did now. Next morning, Anko groaned as she opened her eyes to the rays of sun that penetrated her apartment. She grumbled and reached for her alarm clock. She reached and reached, but she didn't get it. What the hell? She had just placed it on her counter. How much did she drink last night? She remembered almost nothing after the 10th shot of drinking. She was with Naruto and she sang. She also told him to kiss her. She also said something else. What did she say? She didn't remember. I think I told him something. I wonder what it is. Anko leaned up and she noticed that she wasn't in her apartment. She widened her eyes before she looked onto the floor. She noticed her trench coat, her shin guards, her shirt, black skirt, her shinobi pouch and her mesh armor on the floor. Oh hell no. I did not. Anko said before she looked under the covers. She was only in her bra and panties. Oh, the brat didn't. Anko trailed off. She turned her head and she noticed a mop of blonde hair sleeping next to her. Anko jumped up from the bed, unintentionally waking Naruto up. The blonde yawned and rubbed his eyelids. You know, you need to learn to stop wiggling in the bed. You know the lack of sleep I lost. Though seeing you wiggle out of your clothes was amusing, Naruto said, getting up. Anko noticed that only his top half was. He was wearing jeans and the blonde just yawned. Wait. So we didn't, you know. Anko asked while Naruto went into his bathroom. Yeah, right. Like I would do it with someone who reeks of alcohol. Don't be an idiot. You left your keys in your apartment. Don't worry, you're still unmarked, Naruto said, and Anko glared down at her seal. Indeed, she was still unpartnered. While that was a big relief for her, Anko couldn't help but feel a little sad at that. Get this straight, you will not tell anyone about what happened here, Naruto instructed as Anko quickly started to put her clothes on. Damn straight. Don't need you telling your friends how you got an easy lay when you didn't, Anko said before she widened her eyes. Naruto didn't respond and Anko peeked inside. I didn't mean it like that. Sorry Naruto, I just wouldn't want to do it with someone that I didn't know, Anko said sort of palely, and Naruto snorted. Forget it. I know what you mean. Just drink your hangover medication, get some breakfast from the fridge, then you can leave. I've got shit to do, Naruto said, and Anko blinked. Say Naruto, do you mind telling me, what work do you do? Anko asked, and Naruto walked out of the room with his hair sort of wet from rinsing it out in the sink. Ask Hokage-sama, he'll tell you, Naruto said, and Anko just nodded before Naruto left the room. Anko sighed and rubbed the back of her head. The brat's cheeky, I'll give him that, but he's definitely on the ball. But he's wrong. I don't need a partner. I just need to get strong enough that I can watch my own back. I've always done it since that damn snake left. I won't be betrayed again, Anko said, glaring at the ground before she continued to get dressed. Like Naruto, she had shit to do also. Right now, she was grateful for hangover medication. So that's why you asked me about what Naruto-kun meant when he said that you should see me. Well, I suppose that makes sense. You didn't know about the council meeting that we had yesterday during that time, Sarutobi said as Anko stared at him with a very curious gaze. She had long since left the Forest of Death, and Naruto's house, behind to go and speak with her Hokage. Luckily the old man wasn't busy so Anko could pop in, but she couldn't stay for very long. She did have her own work as the INT department in a few hours. Nodding her head to Sarutobi's statement, Anko said, yeah, what did the Gaki mean by that? Anko asked, and Sarutobi took a puff of smoke from his pipe before the smoke filled the air. This, of course, didn't bother Anko as she had been around such things all her life. Right now she would just be patient and allow her village leader to gather his thoughts on the matter. Naruto-kun, apparently, makes weapons, Sarutobi said simply. Anko blinked and placed a hand on her, letting her trench coat sway for a little before settling. Why would he do that? Konoha has some pretty good weapons makers. Don't you think that's unnecessary of the Gaki to do so? Anko asked. Sarutobi shook his head as, in his mind, he probably knew why the blonde had done so. It had really saddened him a great deal, but to sat Anko's curiosity he decided to tell her also, though he knew that she wasn't going to like it. Anko, you know how this village treats him, right? Sarutobi asked, and he immediately noticed Anko's present scowl. She kept her rage in check and settled for a strained nod her of head, allowing for Sarutobi to continue. I believe that Naruto-kun went into making weapons because he couldn't get decent materials from those who mistreat him. I have no idea who he even managed to pick up the craft, but he's basically a genius at it, Sarutobi said, and Anko blinked. Genius. Now I know he's far from the dead last that I thought he might have been. Hell, he's not even worth being called dead last if you allowed him to live in the Forest of Death. Even I wouldn't do that, Anko countered. Get a small sigh from Hiruzen. I know. Even now I think this is a lapse in judgment, but it was the best idea at the time. I hadn't even considered it. Naruto-kun was the one who did, and he carefully provided reasons as to why this was not only best for him, but for the village as a whole. Needless to say, but I couldn't find a fault with it, and it shows that he can keep to himself. Anko, the way he makes his weapons, they surpass those of the current weaponsmiths, Sarutobi said, but Anko didn't seem very surprised. She had tried to remain neutral to it all, but Sarutobi's experienced eyes could see the confusion in her eyes. During the council meeting, Naruto told me that he had discovered a new type of raw metal known as Uzuin. He said that it is called that because it is found near whirlpools in its raw form. The council tried to petition Naruto to build weapons for them, but Naruto obviously takes his craft very seriously. He told them the prices and this got less than happy results. However high the cost is, I can't deny that people will get their money's worth out of the weapon. From the Fuma shuriken that I had seen, it was more durable, more deadly, and capable than any shuriken that our weaponsmiths could make, Sarutobi said, and Anko nodded. But that would put him with Exodus metals, wouldn't it? Anko asked, and Sarutobi shook his head. I wouldn't go that far. Naruto-kun says that he hasn't been doing it that long to be able to even begin to try and duplicate their work, but I'm sure that if Exodus metals ever took a glance at Naruto's work, they would hire him on the spot, but I can't allow it. He's a shinobi now and his first priority is the safety of the village. Hiruzen finished crossing his fingers into each other and he narrowed his eyes when he heard Anko's huff. Yeah, protect the village, that is the cause of your pain and suffering. I wouldn't be surprised if he did just up and quit then leave, Anko said more to herself, but Sarutobi took it seriously. Although somewhere in Anko's mind, the idea of Naruto ever actually leave had unsettled her. She didn't know why. Well, whatever. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Sorry for disturbing you, Anko said, and while Hiruzen wanted to talk some more, he didn't push any more issues and just allowed Anko to leave. Anko bowed her head before closing the door to the room. Sarutobi sighed as silence covered the entire room. He looked out into the direction that the forest of death was in and closed his eyes, silently praying that everything would go well for Naruto for some reason. Naruto's house, basement. Sparks flew off in front of Naruto's cold eyes as his hands worked tediously at what he was holding. The blonde narrowed his eyes before he turned his head and he noticed a large flame furnace with fire and a large piece of metal inside of the furnace. Since having Anko leave, Naruto had rolled up his sleeves and went into his work clothes. Before their last D-rank mission had ended, Kakashi had told them all that they were to meet up at Training Ground 7 at 9 o'clock. It was currently 10 o'clock for Naruto. He had another 2 hours before his sensei would arrive, so he took it upon himself, and the foolishness of his sensei, to work on another project that had taken him more than quite a few months to try and accomplish. This wasn't like his Fuma shuriken that he, and his kits, could get done in 2 days. No, this had to be more precise. Naruto felt the flames in the furnace diminish and he quickly spoke. Rinko, raise the temperature of your fire by 10 degrees. Tuka, once it reaches there, then give a short burst of water, Naruto ordered. Around the room Rinko and Tuka yipped as Rinko opened her mouth and a fire escaped from it. It went into the furnace, igniting it some more to the degrees that Naruto wanted. Once that was done, Tuka took her turn and blasted water into it, allow for steam to escape and enter the air. Sweat dripped from Naruto's face as he was currently holding scissors. He made precious snips to some leather gloves for a small opening. Fu, harden your tail, Naruto said, and Fu yipped as the black, male fox raised its tail in the air. He channeled his chakra around it and Naruto nodded. Fu went and slammed the chakra-enhanced tail to a piece of Uzuin to the corner of the room, getting it to shatter. Naruto had taken it upon himself, over the years, to teach his kits how to use chakra like the Inuzuka dogs. They were still quite off with it, but they made up for it with their stamina. They were all hard workers and none complained when Naruto trained them. It was all for the sake of their father that they endured it all with him. They were happy to be this helpful. It had been at 11 that Naruto had allowed them to enter his basement. He was so proud of them. Fu opened his mouth and took a small piece of Uzuin and brought it to Naruto. The blonde knelt down to take it and patted Fu's head softly before he took out a kunai and sliced a small bit of rock. Naruto gazed at it for a little bit before tossing it into the air. The kits and Naruto watched as the stone hit the ceiling and landed back to the ground without so much as a broken piece of it gone. Naruto nodded and picked it up. Good. Nice and sturdy in this raw form, Naruto mumbled, and he opened a book of sealing that was next to him. His eyes trailed along an advanced formula and he went back to work. After nearly an hour of tedious work, Naruto finally clipped a piece of string to the leather gloves and closed up the opening. He sat back and shook his head lightly. He could still feel the heat burning the metal from the furnace in front of him, and he knew that now, the easy part was finished. Naruto turned his head and looked at the clock to notice that Kakashi would be with his team in about another half an hour. Just in time for him to arrive, Naruto said, getting up. His kits turned to him and Naruto opened the door. Come on, you three. You know the drill. That metal now has to sit in the fire for 7 hours and then we take it out. For now we'll just leave Akaden Bunshin to monitor it in our absence, Naruto said as he summoned a clone. His kits nodded and ran up the stairs from the basement to the hallway and then from the hallway to the upstairs to go and take a shower. Watch the metal carefully. We're nearing the finishing stages of the project, Naruto said, and the clone dutifully bowed before closing the door. Naruto quickly took a short shower, washed his face, brushed his teeth again, threw off his work clothes and placed on his regular training clothes, then his headband. He sighed to himself before shaking his head as Tuka, Rinko and Fu had finished drying their fur and took their places on his body. Naruto grabbed his scrolls, kunai and shuriken sets, and lastly his ID license. Couldn't forget that shit. Naruto opened the door, heard the sounds of various animals across the forest and ran off to meet with his team. Fools they might be, but he wasn't going to be the foolish one and arrive later than their sensei. That would just be disgraceful. Training Ground 7. Sakura and Sasuke growled before the former yawned tiredly. Their sensei told them to meet 2 hours ago and they had arrived dutifully, but now he was just being an ass about it. Add to the fact that their other teammate hadn't even arrived yet and it just began to piss them off even more. However, both were surprised as they saw Naruto land on the ground in front of him reading his orange book. Yurla. Sakura didn't get far as Naruto slapped a silence seal over her mouth. He activated it and carefully leaned against the railing. Sakura widened her eyes and her muffled screams of indecency could be heard by Sasuke and Naruto. Sasuke glared at Naruto, but the blonde took no notice. Oh, he knew that the Uchiha was glaring at him, but he wouldn't give in to a fool's advances. Yo! Sasuke and Sakura looked up to see Kakashi over the railing of the fence behind them. MMMPH. Sakura mumbled and Kakashi narrowed his visible eye before sighing. He released the seal on Sakura's mouth and ripped off the paper, granting her free speech again. Naruto, why the hell did you do that? Sakura shouted, launching a fist at him. Naruto tilted his head and avoided the strike before he surprised Kakashi as he raised his hand and slapped Sakura across the face, sending her to the ground as she widened her eyes at the redness of her cheeks. Naruto, what was the reason for that? Kakashi asked and Naruto didn't answer. The blonde spun on his heel and hopped over the fence while Sasuke looked down at Sakura. He then snorted and followed after Naruto while Kakashi helped Sakura to her feet and over the fence. The training ground was far and the morning mist that usually permeated the area was soon leaving. As the four walked into the training ground, Kakashi grabbed Naruto's shoulder, getting the blonde to stop. Naruto, I know that if Sakura had hit you then she would have been in the wrong, but that doesn't excuse you for assaulting her the way you did, Kakashi said, and Naruto closed his eyes. He turned around and slowly dropped his book. Kakashi was greeted to the sight of impassive eyes looking at him while the blonde decided to elaborate his actions. What would you have done if she had hit me? Naruto asked and Kakashi blinked. Now that he thought about it, he might not have done anything since it was probably in Sakura's sort of violent nature to be that way. Seeing no answer to his question, Naruto continued. As I figured, Hatake. You would have stood there with that dumb eye smile of yours as she hit me. You then probably would have said something along these lines, Mama Sakura, don't do that, Naruto said, and getting a frown from Kakashi. You tell Haruno that she can take her foolish bullshit somewhere else. I am no one's punching bag. Never again. Never, ever again. If you throw a punch, then you had better expect retaliation. She's just lucky that I didn't bust that mouth of hers in the process. Now then, why don't you bring us together and train us like you're supposed to? Naruto said, and Kakashi just stared at Naruto. He was contemplating how to deal with such things said to him, and Kakashi knew that he could take this before the Hokage, but as a Jonin sensei, he couldn't leave all matters to his Hokage on account of his genin. This was supposed to be his job. Naruto, whether or not I did something, there is a time and place for everything. I will overlook it this time because Sakura went at you first and you were right, but this happens again, then I will take action, Kakashi said, and Naruto glanced towards him. Better watch that tone, Hatake. When I make promises, deals, or threats, I will follow through with them. No matter what, Naruto said as he turned back around. Kakashi didn't show any signs that Naruto's words had affected him in the slightest, but they indeed had, and, in a small part of his mind, Kakashi felt that Naruto would be more than happy to make that threat promise a reality. Sighing to himself, Kakashi brought his genin together and instructed them that they would be doing several other D-rank missions, and to end the day they would be doing teamwork exercises. This got a groan from Sasuke and Sakura, but nothing from Naruto. Walking dogs, grocery shopping, returning library books, babysitting the orphans at the orphanage, racking leaves, cleaning a restaurant, and one more painting of a fence. All these D-rank missions Team 7 had accomplished, and their pay was in the midst of being transferred to their accounts. Naruto, of course, didn't need this money for any purpose. If anything, he just stored it in his house's vault and let it accumulate. Maybe it would have some purpose in the future. For an orphan, then foster child, then loner like Naruto, he knew to appreciate what he had been given, unlike Sakura, who took it for granted. During all the D-rank missions, Naruto continued to read his orange book, and he was just getting to the ending. He would never allow himself to giggle perversely, like his sensei had always done, so he only gave a smirk when something good happened. His eyebrows would rise to show astonishment and surprise to something he hadn't seen coming. Seeing such a perverted book, Sakura had growled and glared daggers at the blonde on numerous occasions to try and get him to stop reading such smut, but she didn't voice that opinion. No, Sakura had, for once, kept her mouth shut. She didn't feel like getting hit again, realizing just how much harder Naruto's slaps were in comparison to her punches. Sakura had hoped that Sasuke would come to her defense since she liked him, but Sasuke had continued to ignore her and her pleas since they were beneath him. Arriving back to the training ground at around 3 o'clock, Kakashi closed his book and smiled. Well then, now I guess I'll be teaching you something, won't I? Kakashi asked, and Sasuke grinned while Sakura nodded. Naruto didn't care as he closed his book as well. Everyone waited for their sensei to begin as Kakashi rubbed the back of his head and tried to think of something. Naruto narrowed his eyes and gave a light snort. So he was foolish enough to not even know what to train us in. Pathetic Hatake, Naruto thought before Kakashi gave an eye smile and clapped his hand. Oh yeah, alright then. You're all about to glare me into a hole, so I will ask this. What is chakra? Kakashi asked, and Naruto resisted the urge to just find Kyuubi, rip the seal off, and just hope that the demon fox would devour his sensei for stupidity. It's the ability for those of us as Genin, Chunin, Jonin, Anbu, and even Hokage-sama, to perform jutsu, Sakura said wisely, getting a nod from Kakashi. And what else? Kakashi asked, getting looks of confusion from Sakura and Sasuke. Naruto closed his book loudly, getting everyone attention. It is basically the lifeblood of Shinobi. It is acquired through rigorous training for us to use past just perform jutsu. It allows us to heighten our senses, abilities, and movements. It's the combination of physical and spiritual energy to be melded together in the stomach, or lower abdomen, Naruto said, getting a smile from Kakashi. Very good, Naruto. That's exactly what it is, Kakashi said. Sasuke snorted as he didn't answer anything, and Sakura fumed at being shown up by a presumed dead last of the academy. She knew his grades, how the hell was he smarter than her? It was so stupid. He was making himself seem smart so she would like him instead of Sasuke. Well, it wouldn't work. Not at all. I suppose I want you all to get started on some chakra control exercises. I wanted to teach a bit of teamwork, but a shinobi is more than a team. He needs individual skills. Otherwise, how can you find a good partner? Kakashi asked, and Sakura blushed as she imagined herself and her crush kissing, then becoming partners. Sasuke would use her talents for his goals and she would be much closer to him in return. For Naruto, this was nothing new, as the Sandaime had spoken with him about it. So what are we going to do? Who cares about control as long as you perform the jutsu? Sasuke asked, and Kakashi shook his head. No, you must master the basics first, and the first basic here is, Kakashi stopped midway and approached a tree. He carefully walked up it, getting surprise from Sakura and Sasuke, but only annoyance from Naruto. He hung upside down from a branch and smiled. This is tree climbing. You must focus a fixed amount of chakra to your feet and use that to climb a tree without using your hands. If the flow of chakra is too weak, then you will lose your footing on the tree and fall off. If it's too strong, then you will be pushed away from the tree, causing the tree to break around the point of contact, and you will fall. If you can master this technique, then you can master any jutsu, Kakashi said, getting a glare from Sasuke, a smile from Sakura, and a roll of the eyes from Naruto. Use your kunai to mark your progress and continue from there. If you can get that, then we can move on to the next exercise, Kakashi said with an eye smile. He hopped down and gave a kunai to Sasuke and Sakura, which they took. He then handed one to Naruto, and the blonde glared at the metal. Time seemed to stop as he looked at it before he looked up at Kakashi, who still had his eye smile. Naruto closed his eyes, sighed, and took the kunai from Kakashi as he nodded. You can start, he said as Sakura and Sasuke ran for the tree. Sasuke didn't get far before he backflipped off the bark and landed on the ground. Oh wow, this is so easy. It's incredible, Sakura said as Sasuke looked up to see Sakura already at a branch waving at him. I did it, Sasuke-kun, Sakura shouted, but Sasuke just scowled and turned his head away to mask his frustration that someone weaker than him had actually gotten it on the first try. Well, it looks like the female has the most chakra control. Nice work, Sakura, Kakashi said, and Sakura nodded. That's only because of the fool's pathetic reserves. Hitaki, you should be admonishing her, not praising her. Only when she can get this far should she be boasting about anything. Everyone looked up and Kakashi sighed while Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Sakura gaped as Naruto was at the very top of the tree next to hers. How does the Dobi know this shit before I do? I'm an Uchiha. I'm an elite. Why does he and even Sakura know this? Sasuke thought to himself as Naruto jumped down to the ground. He placed his hands in his pockets and shook his head. It's shit like this that you should teach in the academy. It's also why these little tests of yours have a 66% failure rating, Naruto said, and Kakashi couldn't deny that. The academy was a lot more lax than in the times of war. It was a lot harder, a lot crueler, and a lot stronger. If you couldn't balance kunai on your fingertips for an exercise, then you weren't graduating. Sakura frowned as her accomplishment was diminished to a worthless effort before Naruto opened his jacket. However, since she has so little reserves, then she's the one who can improve the most. Females naturally have better chakra control than males, Naruto said, and Sakura's attitude raised again at Naruto, saying that she could improve. For Naruto, he knew what it was like to be brought down by words, and if he did the same for Sakura, then he, himself, was a fool as well. Those who berate without giving a chance to acknowledge efforts were fools as well. Well said, Naruto. Then you wouldn't mind teaching them the tree climbing exercise, Kakashi said, and Naruto glared at the Jonin before snorting. Whatever, he said, and Kakashi nodded. Truth was, he had to meet with the Hokage for a moment and then be right back. He wasn't running off to ditch their training, this time. Seeing that they were alone, Naruto patted his legs and quickly Rinko, Tuka and Fu dropped to the ground. These are my kits. They are better at this exercise than the both of you. If you can't beat them to the top, then you haven't mastered the exercise. Fu, race Sasuke. Tuka, race Sakura. Rinko, show me what you've been working on, Naruto instructed, and the three foxes nodded. You're just a flea-bitten mongrel. You couldn't be better at this exercise than I could, Sasuke said, and Sakura smiled at Tuka. Please take care of me, she said too, in her opinion, the cute fox. Tuka glared at Sakura as she hadn't forgotten what the female had tried to do to her father. Sasuke and Fu ran up the tree, and instantly Sasuke gasped as Fu sped past him and reached the top of the tree easily. Sasuke didn't even get that far before he fell to the ground. Tuka and Sakura tried it as well, but that ended out in Toka's victory. The female fox never liked her racing partner anyway. Sasuke and Sakura were left slack-jawed while they turned to glare at Naruto, only to be surprised at Rinko launched a fire at a tree, burning it slightly. Naruto nodded with a pleased smile and patted Rinko's head. Very good, Rinko. Your control has improved. Now then, I want you to try water walking along with Tuka and Fu. It's obvious that you're still too good for Sasuke and Sakura, Naruto said, and Rinko nodded as she raced back to Fu and Tuka. Sasuke and Sakura heard the yips of conversation between the three foxes before they raced towards the vacant lake to the left. As they did that, Naruto began to instruct Sasuke and Sakura on the exercise. Both were going to hate Naruto, but if the blonde was to be put in charge of their training, then they would train under his watch. Kuni. In Kuni, there were multiple happy people over the area. Kuni was normally quite an attractive town, as nothing ever really went down there, but that was all because of the weapons magnate, Exodus Metals. It was the largest building across Kuni. It was also greatly wealthy and influential. Many people had often applied to work there as the pay was great and the work was fair, but tough. However, not just anyone could work in Exodus Metals. There was a reason why it had been able to get Kuni out of the debt that it had to a few countries. Because of that, Exodus Metals was a standing monument for Kuni. No one ever knew who the owner of such a corporation was, but not many of them actually cared. Exodus Metals had financed so many places with power, work, and food that it was like a prayer answered from Kami. The next thing about it was that people had heard about the so-called war between Exodus Metals Company and Gato Sping. No one knew the big details, that they were kept low, but people had heard that Gato Sping had, in essence, killed the Exodus Metals influence in Wave and claimed it for his own. No one wanted to know how Exodus Metals would react. In the large corporation, in a single work office, a woman with long green hair growled as she huffed and slapped papers on the table. God damn it, she said, getting up to her feet. She wore a green tank top shirt and dark jeans. She wore her open-toed sandals that were able to wrap around her ankles as she got up and walked out. What are the current revenues after Gato's backwater assault? She asked, shouted, and the attendant near her gulped. It hasn't put a dent to us as we far expected, but we were almost done with Wave's reconstruction before this happened. You did get Naruto-sama's message, right, Kisa-sama? He asked, and the woman named Kisa nodded. Kisa was not a happy woman. Ever since they Exodus Metals managed, With the people's favor, to take out its corrupt daimyo, Exodus Metals had been declared something of a ruler for Yu no Kuni. They had the people's trust and their vote for things to go well. So Kisa was, in essence, the daimyo for Yu no Kuni. She was to be basically a collaboration worker with Exodus Metals for Yu no Kuni's benefit, but she was a worker for Yu no Kuni before she was the daimyo. This place had saved her life and she wouldn't allow someone as sleazy as Gato to try and undermine it. Yes, he gave us his message. We had tried to deal with it when they had first instigated us, but that went south fast. Sometimes I wonder what goes on through his head, Kisa said as she leaned against the railing. She could see various blacksmiths and weaponsmiths working to construct weapons as they wanted within the parameters of Exodus Metals conditions. It was a business after all. They would generally received over 15 applicants a day of people who were hoping to join. Naruto had left the company to her as its figurehead for the most part. Kisa and Naruto had quite a long partners. One that she wouldn't dare to talk about it. It was embarrassing for her. But Kisa-sama, if I might ask, why is it so urgent that Uzumaki-sama needs to hide his identity from the masses of the world, and even then that he's so impassive about what Gato did to Wave? Shouldn't he be like super pissed? The attendant asked and Kisa chuckled to herself. I won't fault you for thinking that, but the brat doesn't get pissed. If he's pissed then you'd better back off. I think he's seeming impassive about it because he plans to go there himself to deal with Gato. There are little things that will ever make him mad, but he cares so much more about his workers than anyone I've seen. To lose such people, who had followed him no less, is in grave sin in his eyes, Kisa said, getting the attendant to gulp. To the other question, it's not really Wave that he's after. He's helping it to be financially stable, but our influence has greatly diminished due to Gato. It's two things that he's after. One is Gato's company. Kisa stopped and took pleasure in the attendant's widened eyes before continuing. The second is the place north of Wave, Kisa said with a sadistic grin on her face that made the attendant shiver. 3 weeks later. Target in sight. It appears to have settled down, Sasuke spoke into his mic. I see it as well. Ready to move on your signal, Naruto spoke as well. I have it as well. Ready to go, Sakura said, though Naruto could hear the hesitance in her voice. Kakashi sighed and placed his fingers to his mic. Confirm red ribbon, Kakashi said, and Naruto carefully held up a small mirror. He looked at the reflection of the target and did indeed see the red ribbon on its ear. The blonde narrowed his eyes before nodding. Confirmation complete. This is the right one, Naruto said, and Kakashi nodded. All right then, let's do this and get it chalked up for another mission to be done. Ready? Go. Kakashi shouted as Sasuke and Sakura lunged for the target. Both scrambled for a cat as it scratched Sakura's face. Sakura yelped and threw the cat into the air before it landed into Naruto's arms. The blonde shook his head and gently scratched the cat's ears, getting it to purr and fall into his arms in bliss. Tora, the Hellcat, has been subdued. Missions complete, Naruto said in a monotone voice, showing that he had no interest in this. Sasuke snorted and Sakura growled at the cat that was purring in Naruto's arms. They had been trying to rush down the cat for a good 2 or 3 hours. It had just been another D-rank mission for them that they had on their record, and one that they hadn't been pleased with. Sasuke and Sakura, under Naruto's instruction, had mastered the tree walking exercise, and Kakashi had them right back to teamwork exercises. He had stressed the importance of it being the key to a shinobi's success, to which Naruto only thought was half bull and half truth. The blonde knew the importance of teamwork, but it wasn't always enough. Individual skills also had to be expounded upon. Rinko, Tuka and Fu had easily taken to water walking as they had increased their reserves. Their reserves were as much as Sasuke's, which, saying that they were foxes was quite the accomplishment. Also they had, much to Naruto's pleasantly surprised face, come up with a few collaboration attacks of their own. They had also used their talents with Naruto to finish the blonde's latest and longest project. It had been a long and tiring process for them all, but Naruto was glad to have it done. Naruto, himself, managed to learn 2 new jutsu and put them under his belt. They weren't much in the way of attack and defense, but just for backup purposes if anyone needed it. In that time, Anko had never gone back to his house and Naruto hadn't been seeking her out either. He had reasoned that she was busy and didn't always have the time to be a pain in his ass. It allowed him just a little peace of mind. Very good, you guys. Now then, let's take it back to them so that we can declare this mission a success, Kakashi said, and everyone nodded their heads as they walked away. In the mission room, Sasuke and Sakura smirked victoriously as the cat, Tora, got its life squeezed out of it by the daimyo's wife. She really strangled it, and at seeing such a thing, Rinko, Tuka and Fu winced before they clung to Naruto a little more possessively. They hoped that they wouldn't be hugged like that. Oh, thank you for finding my lovely Tora. I don't know what I would do if I couldn't find her, she said, and the shinobi bowed before she took Tora away with a happy mood on her face. Seeing that this would more than likely happen again, but for now having it done with, Naruto read the last pages to the first Ika and then pulled out a drama book for himself. Sometimes nothing but scene after scene made books sort of dull. Congratulations on your mission, Team 7. Now let's see. You have cleaning the park, placing up ads for the local bookstore, chaperoning the kids at the academy, or... No. Everyone turned and they noticed Sasuke snarling. The Uchiha Inn had enough of this shit. Sakura was surprised by Sasuke's outburst and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Kakashi sighed while Sasuke shook his head. 3 weeks of this shit is enough. I'm not going to get stronger doing these damn chores that you call missions. Give us something better, Sasuke said to the Sandaime and Iruka, who were looking at each other. Iruka stood to his feet and glared at Sasuke. Watch your tone, Genin. There is an order to everything that needs to be done. Everyone's had to do these missions before. You are no different. This is to familiarize yourself with each other so that contact and teamwork can be established in the field. You need to remember your respect before the Hokage, Iruka scolded, and Sakura was more than ready to defend her crush before Kakashi sighed. Hokage-sama. Naruto's unexpected voice brought everyone's attention to him, but the only thing they could all see was his face covered by his book that he was reading. Yes, Naruto-kun, Sarutobi asked, a little disheartened that the blonde's attitude had been the same. One of so much respect, but at the same time still being impassive to the very end. How many missions has Team 7 accumulated? Naruto asked, and Sarutobi held up a file and opened it. You have all completed 20 D rank missions, added to the 5 that you did today, then 25, Sarutobi said, and Naruto nodded. I believe that in the Shinobi Guide it states, once a team, no matter its members, has completed an appropriate 25 or more D rank missions, then they are eligible to a C rank mission, Naruto said, finishing. Sasuke and Sakura widened their eyes while Kakashi sighed. This would just mean more work for him, and the lazy Jonin really didn't want such a thing. Iruka smiled at Naruto's knowledge, but the glare that the blonde casted sort of made him shiver. That somewhere down the line he had failed Naruto, and so had the academy. Kakashi, what do you think? Are they ready for a C rank mission? Sarutobi asked, and Kakashi sighed. Well, they have all improved. I suppose a chance to get out of the village would do us good. I believe we're ready, Kakashi said, and Sarutobi nodded his head. Iruka just sat down and grumbled about disrespectful genin in these days or something like that. Very well then. We can give you joint C rank mission. This will be an escort mission to Cha no Kuni, T country. You will be partnering up with Team Guy for this mission. The person you will be escorting is the daimyo's daughter who had come to visit Konoha 3 weeks ago. I'm sure that there might be a few bandits, but other than that you should be fine. You are to meet up at the gates in 3 hours, Sarutobi said, and everyone nodded while Kakashi's sweat dropped. Oh dear Kami. Why that team? Kakashi thought to himself before Team 7 left the room. Everyone was confused by their sensei's expression, which was very grave. For Naruto, his face was like he had seen the freakin' Slenderman and lived to tell the tale about it. Not that Naruto believed such shit anyway. Stupid books about stupid myths. Alright then, let's all get ready and meet up at the gates. You three are going to be in for such a surprise when we get to the gates. Now then, don't be late and pack enough for the week. It's quite a walk towards Cha no Kuni, Kakashi said, and everyone nodded before they quickly went their separate ways. Naruto, after having hanged, and brought some groceries from the local market as well as the new releases to some novels, he made his way towards his house in the Forest of Death. Naruto dropped to the ground and opened the door to his house. He didn't get far as a kunai shot at him. Naruto simply ducked under it and continued inside. He dropped his bags to the ground before glaring up. He turned and noticed two Anbu his height in the room. Misa, Sai, what do you want? Naruto asked, and the Sai Anbu took off his mask showing his pale, almost expressionless face. Nice to see you Naruto-senpai again. Sai and Naruto paused as he tried to put his things into the refrigerator. I'm not your senpai Sai-san. In order for me to be your senpai I'd have to be with Root. I'm not, therefore I'm not your senpai. Also why is Misa with you? Naruto asked. Danzo-sama had me take her to see you, Sai said, and Misa stepped forward. Naruto-sama, Danzo-sama has petitioned you to make weapons for Root, Misa said as toneless as she could, but Naruto could hear the small feminine tone in it. That news had caught him off guard to say the least. Naruto normally wasn't one to be caught off guard by anything, but dealing with Danzo for quite a while, the blonde still didn't know how the old Warhawk thought. Danzo was as much an enigma to Naruto as Naruto was an enigma to Danzo. Neither could fully comprehend the other. That's what made Danzo so interesting to Naruto, that the blonde had to be a partner to him. Danzo would indirectly train Naruto by offering him scrolls, and Naruto would work with Root from time to time, like a messenger or shorthand of sorts. I see. Well, Danzo's no fool. He knows my work fee. I'm going to need, Naruto said before Sai placed a bag on the table. Half of the money and the other half upon completion, but from Danzo you have said that you will work for jutsu, so he has offered you 3 B rank techniques, and 1 C rank jutsu, Sai said, and Naruto glanced to them. 2 wind techniques, a water technique and a fire technique. A fair price. Very well. I know how many of you there are en route. Expect your supplies within the month, Naruto said, and Sai bowed his head. Misa did as well, but she wasn't finished. Naruto-sama, Danzo-sama has also asked you if you would be willing to have an assistant besides your kits. Someone to help you around more, Misa said, but Naruto shook his head. I require no help. Thanks for asking anyway. You two may go now. I suppose it was pleasant to see you, Naruto said, and before he even finished placing his things away, he felt the two leave his house as quickly as they might have came. With his fridge fully stocked, Naruto closed the door and took the scrolls into his hands and opened them. B rank Sweden. Hanran Bansho B rank Kaden. Dienden C rank Futon. Yuha Sho and B rank Futon. Atsugai. Naruto read through the entire list of each individual jutsu and closed the scrolls. He rubbed his neck and sighed. It would seem that he would have just a little more to work on while guarding this woman. Collecting the scrolls together, Naruto placed them in his pouch and collected his things for the trip. He placed them in scrolls, and those scrolls were placed into the sides of a black jacket that he was wearing. He grabbed a few Fuma shuriken and his newly made one. He then looked down at his newest project and narrowed his eyes. He just shrugged his shoulders and pocketed those as well. Naruto took one last look at his house before turning off the lights and closing the door. He hoped that things would be rough just a little bit. Naruto wanted to shake things up a little. Naruto arrived at the gates a few minutes from the 3 hours that they were supposed to arrive. As he dropped to the ground, he noticed 3 others along with his teammates. A male Hyuga, a female with bun hair, and a bowl-cut boy in a green jumpsuit. Naruto raised an eyebrow before he snorted and shook his head. "Oh, it's Naruto Baka," Sakura said, getting the girl and her teammates to turn to the side. Naruto walked up to them and leaned against the large open gates and continued to read his book. "Asu. How do you do? I'm Konoha's green beast. I'm Rock Lee," the boy known as Lee said. Quote. Quote. Lee blinked before he turned to his 2 teammates. The Hyuga and the girl shrugged their shoulders while Lee smiled. "Those are my teammates Tenten and Neji. This is your first C-rank mission, right? Awesome. We'll get it done and our flames of youth will shine brightly for our village," Lee said with his tears falling. "Sorry. What did you say?" Naruto asked, coming to his senses. His kits whimpered at the sight of the energetic young man in front of them. Those clothes, that hair, those eyebrows. Naruto could feel Fu shuddering against his body and shook his head. He only then noticed that Lee seemed to be gawking at him. "Damn you and your attitude. I see that you are to be my destined rival since Gai-sensei and Kakashi-san are rivals. I will not lose to you. And if I do, then I will run around Konoha 500 times on my hands, and if I can't do that," Lee went on about his attempts, and each time Naruto gripped his book a little tighter. "This guy is as worse as Haruno," Naruto thought before he noticed Lee was bonked across the head. "Lee, that's enough out of you. Stop bothering him." "Sorry about that. Lee's a little eccentric is all. Can I get your name?" Tenten asked. Without lowering his book, Naruto answered. "Uzumaki Naruto, Tenten-san. It's Team 7's first C rank, so I guess good luck to you," Naruto said, and he noticed that he didn't get a response. Silence became apparent and the blonde lowered his book to allow himself to see Tenten staring at him. "Why, you're Uzumaki Naruto?" Tenten asked, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. "Great. Another foolish person in this village. It will never end, I guess. It's to be expected since these fools fails to see the true powers of Fuinjutsu." "That's right. I am," Naruto said, getting on his guard in case of anything. However, he wasn't prepared as Tenten dropped to her knees and bowed to the ground. Naruto blinked while Neji, Sasuke, Lee and Sakura seemed confused. "Why, you're my idol. Please, can I see the weapon? The one that was used against Kakashi-san. It's the talk of the village that you design weapons of a weird design. Please, can I see it?" Tenten begged, and Naruto rolled his eyes. "The Dobi makes weapons." Sasuke wondered while Sakura seemed to wonder just what the hell was wrong with the girl in front of her. She should be bowing to Sasuke, not to the idiot. Neji's face scrunched up into a glare, and since he was a Hyuga, his pupil-less eyes made it all the more intimidating or so. "Why should I?" Naruto asked, folding his arms. Tenten looked up in surprise before she grabbed Naruto's hands. "Anyone who makes weapons must pass on their work to their followers." "Just a peek?" Tenten asked, and Naruto just stared at the girl before he reached into his pouch and tossed out the Fuma shuriken. He handed it to Tenten and she gleefully watched it gleam in the sunlight. She managed to click a button and widened her eyes as the 4 swirl blades to the shuriken popped out. Sakura gasped and Sasuke snorted, but truth was that he was impressed with its design as well. Back during the Kakashi fight, Sasuke couldn't get a good look at it, but now it was amazing. If he could master that weapon, then he could get rid of Itachi easily. "Sugoi. This is incredible, Naruto-san. I can't see a flaw anywhere. It's even beyond what my dad can create. You could get a job with Exodus Metals. I plan to work there myself. Wouldn't it be cool if we both worked there?" Tenten asked, trying to get an excited response from Naruto, but the blonde just seemed disinterested about it all. "Whatever," Naruto said, folding his arms. Tenten shrugged her shoulders before gazing back up at the weapon. Her dad had signed up their weapons shop with Exodus Metals and they would receive and deliver materials between each other. Tenten didn't know the reasons why the other 5 small family business had joined, but they couldn't be bad reasons. Well, all our youthful companions have arrived. That is the feeling of youth. We will tackle this with the best of our ability. Our passionate flames will not die down from this adventure. Isn't that right? Everyone turned and Naruto's eyebrow twitched while Fu, Rinko, and Tuka popped their heads out and they instantly regretted doing so. It was an adult Lee. He wore the same thing that Lee wore except that he made the outfit look so much worse. Naruto looked down as he noticed Tuka had managed to get underneath his black shirt and huddle close to his chest away from the scary monster that was made a guy. Naruto could feel her shiver and he wondered if maybe Tuka just wasn't used to those kinds of people. They didn't have a problem with Anko, but then again Anko's eyebrows never took of about 5% of her face. This guy was just a category of weird that Naruto didn't want to get into. He could in fact feel his IQ dropping from every word this guy said out of his mouth. So this is Maida Guy. The strongest taijutsu user in Konoha. No doubt he's passed that ability on to Lee-san if his outfit is any indication. I just know I'm going to have a headache when this is over, Naruto thought to himself and gave a heavy sigh. Sasuke and Sakura winced at the sight of the man and Sakura carefully inched her way to Sasuke to try and hide behind him. So you are Kakashi's youthful students. You look like a fine bunch. Let's get this mission done. Guy shouted and Lee shouted as well. Neji held his head down and so did Tenten in embarrassment. Naruto shook his head and went back to his book. A few minutes later, Kakashi appeared with his lame excuses as always before everyone noticed a palanquin. Inside was a girl about Naruto's age along with the palanquin holders or bearers or whatever it was that Naruto couldn't figure out. He just shook his head while the men dropped the large litter to the ground while the woman stepped out. She was your traditional well-to-do rich girl. She wore the fancy robes, had the fancy hair, bowed with a nice grace and her face was blemishless as usual. Naruto had known why she was here. She wasn't some tourist coming to Konoha. No, she had heard about Exodus Metals through Konoha and apparently the daimyo of Cha no Kuni was hoping if Konoha would be able to contact the head of Exodus Metals since Cha no Kuni was out of the way from Yu no Kuni. Exodus Metals had respectfully declined the offer saying that it wasn't needed for the woman to force herself so she was going back home fiancé-less. Thank you for your protection. I hope you serve us well during your stay, she said in a melodious voice. Everyone nodded to her, except for one person. She turned to see Naruto reading his book and she read the title. Wild Storms in the Sunlight Garden, a very rare and expensive book. Only about 10 of those books were ever to be sold. Her father had one and she had read it. She never expected a commoner to have one. Also maybe she was mistaken or not, but she saw ruffled in his zipped-up jacket. She blinked before she sauntered over to Naruto. I wonder how Naruto will react to royalty, Kakashi thought to himself. Everyone else probably wondered the same as the young woman came up to him. Thank you for offering your services and protection to me. I hope we have a pleasant time, she said. Everyone waited with bated breath for a response, but to their surprise there wasn't one. The only sound that could be heard was the sound of a page turning. See, can he do that? Ignore such a powerful woman? Tenten asked, but no one answered. Neji narrowed his eyes while Lee and Guy seemed confused. Naruto just flipped another page of his book while the young woman leaned up. I'm Kyoko. What might your name be? The young woman asked. Still she got no response. This didn't seem to go well with the palanquin bearers as one of them marched up to the blonde. Kyoko-sama has generously offered her name to you. Answer her, peasant, he said, and Kyoko frowned as did everyone else. Naruto made no indication that he either acknowledged Kyoko's presence or the man's presence and everyone still waited. Kyoko looked down and she noticed 3 sets of eyes looking at her. They blinked in confusion of her appearance and Kyoko smiled at the three. Wow, they are so cute. Their fur is also amazing. I wish I could have one, Kyoko said, and Naruto brought his book down to allow his eyes to glare at her. He then sighed. Hitaki, how long until we move out? Naruto asked, finally speaking, and that broke everyone's musings. Kakashi blinked before clearing his throat. Kyoko-sama, we will need you back in the palanquin to proceed. We're a little behind schedule and we should get a move on. Naruto and Tenten will take the front. Sasuke and Neji will take the side. Sakura and Lee will take the other side. Then Guy and I will take up the rear also, just a little further. Naruto, you're our eyes as you have the best sensor capabilities. Use your clones to scout ahead and warn us of trouble, Kakashi instructed. Naruto grunted an acknowledgement as he strolled up to the front with Tenten. Well, he's just Mr. Personality, isn't he? He's like you, Neji, Tenten said, and Neji snorted then grumbled in that order. He took his spot with Sasuke on the left side of the palanquin, as did Sakura and Lee, though Sakura had reservations as Lee winked at her, getting shivers down her spine. Kyoko-sama, the palanquin, one of the men said, and Kyoko shook her head left and right. No, I won't ride unless I can ride with one of those adorable foxes in my lap, she whined, and people groaned as they glanced to Naruto, hoping that the blonde would agree. The foxes quickly hid themselves from view and scrunched up close to their father figure. Naruto, don't you think that you should comply? Tenten asked. Naruto said nothing. If someone asked for a parent to give them their child, would they? Naruto didn't know about other parents, but for him it was a hell no. They were his kids. He would just comply, wait for her to get fed up with waiting like the little fool she was, get in the palanquin and have them complete their mission. It was a long 5 minutes of silence, but everyone could see that either Naruto wasn't paying attention, he wasn't going to hand them over, or he was just being selfish. Sakura growled and marched up to Naruto. Naruto, give the daimyo's daughter one of your foxes. It's not like she's going to keep them, so just give her one of the mongrels. Sakura said, and Naruto took in a deep breath of air and exhaled. Remember your place, Haruno. It's back next to Lee-san. I suggest that you get over there if you know what's good for you, Naruto warned, but Sakura persisted. Guys, Tenten said, and everyone was watching the scene in front of them with interest. Kakashi took an unconscious step forward. Something told him that this might end very badly, with Sakura being on worse terms with Naruto that she already was. Damn it, they are just dumb animals. If she wants one, then you hand one to her. Sakura said and reached her hands forward. She just got inches within Naruto's torso before everyone blinked. Naruto grabbed Sakura's and quickly squeezed it, sending her to the ground. Sakura winced painfully at the touch of Naruto's hands, and she was sure that she could hear a small bone snap. Naruto, that's enough. Let Sakura go, Kakashi ordered, and Naruto let Sakura kneel on the ground some more in a way that forced her to look into his eyes. Don't you ever touch my kids, Naruto snarled, and Sakura shivered as she felt her mouth stop working. I will never entrust their lives with someone that I don't know. I could give a damn who she is or what family she comes from. You try and touch them again and there won't be an arm for you to try and reach for them again, Naruto said before he threw Sakura's arm away and resumed his post. Sakura turned and saw the hand print from Naruto's touch on her skin. She shivered before Kakashi helped her up. He shot Naruto a look, and the blonde knew that he did, but he ignored it. Seeing that the scene was over, one of the men cleared his throat. Kyoko-sama, if you don't mind now. It seems that the young man isn't going to relent, he said, and Kyoko nodded wisely. She glanced back at Naruto for a bit and she was sure that he gave her a corner of his eye that dared her to even try something like Sakura had. Very well, let's go. I couldn't get them today. Maybe tomorrow, she said. Naruto snorted and he unzipped the upper half of his jacket to see Rinko and Fu yipping at him. He then went to the next layer, his shirt, and opened it to see Tuka furled up and sleeping calmly next to her father's warm stomach like she always did. Sorry you had to see me like that, Naruto said, and the foxes just smiled as Fu and Rinko curled into each other and slept. Naruto zipped up his chest and felt a hand on his shoulder. Naruto, are you alright now? Tenten asked, and Naruto closed his eyes. I'm fine, Tenten-san. Forgive my actions. I foolishly let my anger get the better of me. I need more training, Naruto said, and Tenten shook her head. No problem. I can see that they mean a lot to you. I think you were kinda cool, Tenten complimented, and Naruto just grunted. Cool, huh? No one's ever called me that. There might just be a future for you, Tenten-san, Naruto thought to himself with a small inner smile. Pretty soon everyone walked out of the gates and into the forest. For Sakura it was a big deal to finally be out of the village. As for Sasuke, it was just nice to finally have a higher mission, one where he would get stronger and then prove himself before his brother as he was an Avenger. For Naruto, this was nothing new. He had done all of this before when he had first left Konoha by himself. "Ne Kakashi-sensei, does Cha no Kuni have any shinobi?" Sakura asked. Naruto would have thrown a rock at her for that question, but he had resisted. He did enough to her as it was in letting his emotions get the better of him. He really had to rein that it. It would mean the death of him if he ever reacted that fierce to anything. No, Sakura. Cha no Kuni doesn't have shinobi. It's just a small country south of Konoha. They don't have a military force, and so they come to the major hidden villages or minor villages and give us missions to do things for them. It's how the economy works. So if you're expecting to run into shinobi or kunoichi, then you won't have to worry. As Hokage-sama said, a few bandits or nothing else, Kakashi said, and Sakura nodded with a sigh of her lips. She was, secretly, relieved that they wouldn't be running into trouble, but Sasuke scowled at such words. Time ran its course as people continued through their various things. Lee was trying to get Sakura on a date, much to her chagrin. Neji and Sasuke were saying nothing and brooding. Guy was trying to challenge an unwilling Kakashi to a fight or something, the palanquin bearers huffing to carry Kyoko across the dirt road, and a frowning Kyoko at not getting to play with one of Naruto's kits. Meanwhile, Tenten was trying to strike up a conversation with Naruto, but the blonde never gave many responses. He seemed uninterested. Wow. So you've been in the weapon-making business for 6 years. That's amazing. I've only started doing it about 2 years ago. I can't even make things of what you showed me. I did make something. Would you like to see? Tenten asked. Naruto glanced towards her and rolled his eyes at the girl's attempts, but at least she wasn't being some foolish bitch or ignorant woman, so he just allowed her to do so. Tenten went into her pouch and held out 3 kunai. All 3 were the same length and they seemed to be made out of the same metal as those from Konoha that they used originally. See critique please. Tenten asked, and Naruto grabbed one. He flipped it around in his hands and then placed it on his arms. He gave a quick slice and watched small traces of blood flow out. The blonde Jinchuriki nodded before giving the kunai back. They need work, Naruto said, and Tenten widened her eyes before she smiled sadly. Yeah, I guess they would. Thanks for being honest, she said, and Naruto glanced to her. Aw, damn women in there. I really would like just a little praise for my work methods. Naruto sighed and took a kunai. The metal that you've used is very durable and your originality is really showing. The curving point of the kunai is the focal point to where you concentrated the heat. You thought that if you sent the heat to the lower portion, then the upper portion wouldn't melt and it would be ineffective and the melting metal would shape weird. Also, it's heavy. That's not a bad thing, but for being kunai, then they would dip when thrown in the wind due to resistance. What temperature did you have and what metal? Naruto asked. I believe I had it to 300 degrees and I used a portion of steel, an inch of diamond and osmium, Tenten said, and Naruto closed his eyes. He took a small huff and shook his head. Your first mistake was the choice of metals. Steel and osmium do not go well together. The density of osmium will overtake the density of steel since it has a better durability. Second mistake is that diamond burns well into the 4892 degrees where you shouldn't even be staying in the room without an air conditioner to regulate that temperature and have personal equipment. I see the specks of diamond in your kunai and you should know that diamond doesn't melt. Adding pressure to it will increase density, but that's all you get. Your temp was way too low and your choice of melts are inappropriate, Naruto scolded with a slight bonk to Tenten's head. She nodded and apologized. So, what should I do? Tenten asked. Figure it out. You're supposed to be a weapons mistress. You should understand how a weapon feels, Naruto said, and Tenten just nodded as they continued to walk through the dirt road. As they walked, Naruto shifted and he quickly stopped. Stop, he said, and people stopped immediately. Naruto, what is it? Kakashi asked and Naruto glared forward. One of my clones dispelled. I couldn't even get a good look at who did it before it was too late. Whoever it is, they got me by surprise. Which is no small feat, Naruto said with the last part to himself. Everyone tensed as Kakashi and Guy took point. Everyone proceed cautiously now. We're going in, Kakashi said, and everyone nodded as they tensed and walked. The bearers were tense and the footsteps were slowly coming to a stop. Kakashi and Guy looked left and right, but saw no sight of anyone. Neji, scope the area, Guy commanded. Neji nodded and held up 2 fingers. Byakugan, Neji shouted, and Naruto looked around. He could hear his kits growling, telling him that someone was nearby and that they really knew how to hide. The blonde looked left and right as did everyone else. Sakura tensed while Sasuke held a kunai. Lee moved his eyes fast left and right while Tenten took out a kunai. So these are the people that he sent to protect Yukioko-sama. Well, I feel special, someone said as they quickly came into view. They were easily male and female. The female wore a revealing red outfit, showing her midriff, arms and legs, with her white hair tied back by a multicolored rope with bells attached to it. She had multiple tattoos that resembled flower petals on the left side of her face and midriff as well as her left leg. She also wore red high-heeled sandals. She came in rolling with the mist as did her partner. The male was a hulking figure with red-orange, spiky hair. He wore a sleeveless blue shirt that was tucked into his dark gray pants, which, in turn, were tucked into military-style boots. The pants were held up by a red belt, which matched a strap going across his chest from his right shoulder to under his left arm. Kakashi and Guy quickly readied themselves, but they weren't ready for the large number of bandits that were behind them. Why, Guy said while the woman smiled. I'm surprised you remember, Guy. It's been a long time. After all, I was planning to partner with you or Kakashi-senpai when I was in the Anbu, she said while Kakashi and Guy narrowed their eyes. Kagura, so you're still alive. What have you been doing? Kakashi asked, noting the seriousness of the situation. Kagura was a former Anbu of Konoha. No one had ever figured out why she had left, as she was one of the most promising Anbu that anyone could think of. Couldn't tell you that, Kakashi, but I will show you this, Kagura said as she held her hands into the air. Kakashi widened his eyes as he saw that her fate seal had a pair of symbolic wings across it, showing that she had a partner. I like to think that I could still get a little stronger. Isn't that right, Bando? Kagura asked while Bando grinned. Hand over the bitch and we might let you live, he said in the typical villain fashion. Why don't you try and make us, Sasuke said with a grin on his face. Bando glared at him hatefully and smiled. If you insist, he said and blurred out of speed. Sasuke widened his eyes as someone as large as him could move that fast. Ugh, Sasuke grunted as he was kicked far into the air. The Uchiha coughed while everyone else gasped. Naruto glared back at Kagura while Kakashi lifted his headband. It seems like I'm going to have to use this, he said, and Kagura smiled. Oh senpai, you would use that on me. I'm honored, Kagura said while Kakashi opened his left eye to reveal the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. Get them or you won't get paid. Kagura shouted and the Rouge bandits shouted in cheers as they ran forward. Shit, Kakashi said as he took out a kunai. Guy was more than ready to act, but both were surprised as Naruto walked forward. Naruto, what are you doing? This isn't someone that you can fight. She was an Anbu. She won't easily be taken down, Kakashi shouted, but he watched Naruto reach into his pockets. Don't be foolish, Hatake. I know where my limits are and I aim to break them apart. I'm just clearing out the traffic, Naruto said as he took out his leather gloves. Kagura raised an eyebrow as did everyone else. Without worry, Naruto strapped on the gloves and cracked his knuckles. Kakashi and Guy blinked as they saw white stripes of light bashing against each other multiple times. You all think you can get in my way? Naruto asked before everyone watched as he snapped his fingers. Kai, the blonde shouted and seals lit up on his hand as he snapped them again. A small fire suddenly appeared and raced along the line around the blonde showing everyone the hidden wires. Naruto brought his hands together to cross the other and it only took a second before the bandits exploded in blood and fell to the ground. Kagura widened her eyes as did everyone else. Know your place, Naruto said, not even needing to glare at the piles of dead bodies that already laid at his feet. Omake. Let me see it. Please,